Hello and welcome to Powerful Nothing, a Magic the Gathering podcast. This is episode 6 and we're going to be doing our set review for Cube for the Lord of the Rings Tales from Middle-earth set. As always, I'm joined by my co-host James. How's it going, dude?
Yeah, pretty good. Up north, visiting the mighty town of Chesterfield, known as Ches Vegas to some. Party town of the north.
I want to know who it is known as that.
Well, you can take it with as much or as little irony as you like. Yeah, no, pretty good, man. Pretty good. Got to play pre-release, so know the cards a little bit now. Yeah, good. Psyched to talk some Lord of the Rings. It was pretty good.
No, definitely, yeah. There's a bunch of cool cards in this set, and we're going to be talking about quite a few of them today. Yeah, as you mentioned, we have played with these cards now. We did pre-release, and we also took part in the early access event last week. Yeah, there's definitely some mechanics in this set that I think our opinions of them are probably a bit better now that we've actually got our hands on them and kind of played them a little bit. So James, what's your thoughts on the set? How was your pre-release?
Pre-release was fun. Had a nice black-white deck. Some good beatdowns. I will say I think the set is fairly, in terms of limited mechanics, I think it's has some core set vibes to me. I think it's a relatively straightforward limited set. Not that there aren't interesting interactions and good mechanics, but it's not a set like March of the Machine, for example, where you could go really deep on certain archetypes. I think it's a fairly straightforward limited format, but that's completely fine. I think having a variety of complexities in them is not a bad thing. In terms of how the mechanics played for Cube, I think ring tempting's interesting, and mass is obviously an interesting mechanic as well. So yeah, I think there's some good stuff to go through.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I completely agree. Actually, kind of with the feel of it. It kind of actually, in a weird way, it feels like this is half made for like Commander and half made for like to feel that kind of corset-y role. Kind of yeah. I did pretty well in pre-release, but my deck literally just curved out and had removal. It wasn't doing anything splashy. It was just play a creature every turn and kill their threats and kind of win. So
yeah, I wonder if there was a little bit of if a lot of they're hoping to get a lot of new players into the game through this set, right? Like Lord of the Rings fans who want to come back or try Magic. So I wonder if they were trying to not make the cards so complex that it would be accessible to them, you know?
No, definitely that makes sense. Just on the topic of complexity, there is probably a mechanic we should probably talk about first because it comes up a number of times on different cards, and that is the ring tempts you. So I'll kind of give the overview first, and we'll kind of do a bit of a deep dive into kind of what we think of it. So a lot of cards will say, like, they'll have an effect, they'll do something, and then they'll have the words, the ring tempts you. What that means is that you get an emblem named the ring, if you don't have one, and then you choose a creature to become your ring bearer. If you don't have a creature, the ring still gets abilities, but it's not equipped to anything, as it were, if that makes sense. So the ring kind of has 4 stages that kind of each time you're tempted, it gains the next ability down, if that makes sense. So the first time the ring tempts you, your ring bearer becomes legendary and can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. So we've kind of seen that effect before. I'm pretty sure it's just Skulk. When you're tempted the second time, whenever your ring bearer attacks, draw a card, then discard a card. The third time you're tempted, whenever your ring bearer becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller sacrifices it at end of combat. And the fourth time you're tempted, the final and ultimate, as it were, whenever your ring bearer deals combat damage to a player, each opponent loses 3 life. So they're interesting effects. Like, from experience playing with them, I did actually quite enjoy it. It was a lot simpler than I thought it was going to be. Kind of, there's a lot of text on the dual-sided card that you get, but it actually played pretty straightforward. James, what did you think of the ring tempts you as a whole?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with all of that, really. It was, I like that it makes you plan ahead a little bit in terms of what you choose as your ring bearer. I think it's inherently an aggressive ability, right? It punishes blocking, but I think it punishes blocking in a way where it will let you get through a board stall, but I don't think it really leads to snowbally games that finish super quickly. And I think, yeah, it was... because of having this thing which isn't a dungeon but looks a bit like a dungeon, it was compared to things like Monarch and Initiative and whatnot. But it's a very different mechanic in how it plays out because it can't really snowball. It's inherently capped. It is worth noting, you can't get more than those 4 abilities. Subsequent instances of ring tempts you are not completely wasted because they will get you to move your ring bearer around, or if your ring bearer's died, you can choose a new ring bearer. I thought it played well in the limited format in terms of the payoffs for legendary creatures, because obviously it gives you a legendary creature. So if you have enough ring tempting, you can quite reliably get there on those synergies without just hoping to open good legendary creatures, which, I mean, there are at uncommon, but you still have to get them. I thought that part played pretty well. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like a super powerful ability. Obviously, the more instances that you have, the better it is. The first ring tempt is really not that valuable. And it does scale a bit better. I think specifically once you get to that looting is the first time you're really getting paid for this. But I thought it played okay.
No, definitely, yeah. The point you said there about this being quite an aggressive mechanic, I do actually very much agree with. Like I don't think slower decks or control decks want this mechanic at all. And one thing that we'll see as we go through the set review, and especially as we're looking at these for Cube, it's highly unlikely that there's going to be lots of the ring tempts you running around in Cube, unless obviously you're doing a set Cube, in which case you're going to be recreating limited, where it's kind of, it was made for, there's lots of creatures and effects that tempt you. I think the main thing when I'm going to be looking at cards, I don't know if you're the same, James, but basically the ring tempts you is kind of a nice little bonus. The card already has to be playable, I think, to get in, and if it has the ring tempts you, then cool, that's a nice bonus. Like there's some cards in this set we're not going to be talking about. There's like a worse shock at sorcery that the ring tempts you, like that I don't think is going to get in. Just giving you that one time ring tempts you effect isn't worth losing. Like it isn't worth just running a worse card than what is available to you. Because again, we say this with every set review, but we are comparing these to every other card available in all of Magic. So it is something to consider when we talk about them, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. It's also worth noting different creatures have different value as the ring bearer. It is much more of a buff to some creatures than others. Obviously, lower powered creatures gain a lot more off the Skulk ability. As an opponent at pre-release, make the Moria Marauder the ring bearer, which is a 1/1 double strike, which you get a card when you exile a card and you can play it when you hit them. There being a ring bearer is phenomenal because you can only block it with 1-powered things. So unless you have a sort of 1/3 or something very specific, that's just going to get you cards every turn. Whereas making your 4/4 ring bearer is not that useful until you get to the later stages because most things have less than 4 power, so we'll be able to block anyway.
I agree, but because in my sealed pool I had the 4/2 Golem, and Golem is actually it's kind of flavorful, a terrible ring bearer. He's got 4 power, 2 toughness, lots of things can block and trade with him. And even when I had the ring on like a 5/5, that third ability, you're going to be killing things in combat anyway. It's less of a big deal. Kind of like one of the things with the third ability of if a creature can block it, it dies at end of combat, I guess would be trying to be trading up in mana or something like that. It's kind of a bit of a weird one there.
Yeah, I guess it's for if you have a 1/3, then they block it with their 1/3 that gets punished. But yeah, it's not. I have found that to very rarely get brought up. I guess it's good against double blocks or whatever as well. But yeah, I felt like that was the least relevant of the stages of Ring, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'd agree. Maybe one last thing I do kind of want to touch on is there are a number of creatures in Cube that I do think would be fantastic ring bearers already. I am thinking of things like Goblin Rabble Master or those kind of effects. Just be able to get through with them, but they can't be blocked and your tokens are swinging in as well. That could be quite powerful. But I think it does lead you in more down the aggro route with these. Like aren't as many creatures who aren't in red and white I'm super excited about at the moment, giving the ring bearer to.
Yeah, for sure. I think Goblin Rabble Master specifically is the problem is it gets a big power boost when it attacks.
Oh, that one's true. All right, yes.
But the other Rabble Master variants, like Squee, for example, I think are quite good ring bearers. The one I was particularly excited about actually was Dreadhorde Arcanist.
Ooh, okay.
Because it's giving you value every time you attack, and it's a 1/3, so they'd need like 3/1 power creatures to be able to kill it in combat once it has that skulk ability.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal ring bearer. Right, so I think that kind of covers our thoughts on the ring. Let's actually kind of see how they are on cards. James, do you want to take it away with our first white card of the day?
Sure. So first up in white, we have Boromir, Warden of the Tower. It is 2 and a white for a legendary creature human soldier. It's a 3/3 with vigilance. And whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. And it has an activated ability of Sacrifice Boromir, Warden of the Tower. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. The ring tempts you. Okay, so quite a lot going on with this card. 3 mana, 3/3 vigilance. Quite easy to cast. Good ancient 2 mana. And is pretty solid, but an exciting body. The first ability scales quite nicely into very powerful cubes, though. Shutting down things like all the evoke elementals, shuts down all the forces, force of will, force negation. Obviously, you can get Moxen. That's less relevant because they've often come down earlier. But things like Mishra's Bauble, even a lot of the big Storm payoffs rely on you like casting cards for free. Things like Bolus's Citadel or Mind's Desire, something like Golos. These all, it blanks a lot of things sort of incidentally, which is quite nice. And then that second ability, we've seen this on Selfless Spirit, it's pretty strong. It means if they have, Doomblades and whatnot, they have to kill this first. They can't kill your Hero of Bladehold, whatever 4-drop you played. They've got to target this. And obviously, it's fantastic against sweepers. I don't think this adds up to it being like a tier 1 3-drop. I don't think this is better than Adeline, for example. But I think it's pretty solid. I think you could put this in most cubes and it would like see decent play in a White Weenie deck. I don't think I have any interest in it outside of White Weenie, really. I think that's realistically going to be its only home. The only other thing I thought of was if you want to go full meme, it does entirely lock out your opponent with Possibility Storm, which is quite funny. But probably not something you're realistically including.
No, but I'm going to lose to maybe you in that in Commander, aren't I? That's going to be it.
If only it was Boros, I could make it a Commander and play Possibility Storm. It'd be phenomenal. But yeah, I think this is pretty solid as a 3-drop. Not the most exciting card of the world, but I think it will be like better than it looks if you play it in vintage cubes as a 3-drop.
No, that's awesome. No, if I'm honest, I didn't clock the fact that it turns off Moxen. I thought that, well, the cost is 0, but yeah, you're not paying mana for them. That makes sense. Yeah, I could actually see that being fairly strong. Like, I think it does kind of depend on what the cube looks like around it. Like, do you think you need to be like pushing like a decent like Death and Taxes style thing in your cube for this to kind of see play to kind of go in as one of those kind of like hateful creatures that kind of incidentally turns off things? Because like as you said, it like you listed other stuff it turns off, but it also like will turn off things like Rebound, I think, and like Hideaway. This will kind of hit an annoying, like more than you initially think in a cube, I guess. But
it'll be one of those cards where when you play with it, you don't realize how much work it's doing because you and your opponent's sitting there raging about all the cards that just don't work in their hand or looking under their Shelldock Isle at their phenomenal game-winning spell. Yeah, I think it's pretty solid. I don't. Do you need to specific Death and Taxes build? I think you just need a aggressive white deck with cheap creatures. I think you want pressure on board before you cast this. It is unfortunate in a Death and Taxes style build. It's actually kind of a nombo with Thalia specifically, which is obviously one of the sort of iconic cards of that deck. If you have, say, Force of Will,
I see.
Failure makes
Yes.
them pay 1 for that Force of Will, and then it works against Boromir.
And that's not good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I guess in those spots, you probably like even in just White Weenie, you maybe want Thalia more. But yeah, it's
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think that means you can't have both of them in the deck. It's just a thing that will come up sometimes.
no, that's fair. But yeah, up for Boromir. Yep, looks quite fun. All right, let's take it away with our next one. Next up, we have Flowering of the White Tree. It is a white and a white for a legendary enchantment. Legendary creatures you control get +2/+1 and have ward 1, and non-legendary creatures you control get +1/+1. So I do actually like this, but I don't know if most decks want this. Like Anathems are generally fine, but most white aggro decks would much rather just play a 2-drop on turn 2. But I guess maybe you are playing this later in the game once you maybe have a board state, and this is kind of like your game-winning spell. But then because we're kind of comparing this to like all other cards in Magic, I think a card like Unbreakable Formation is just a bit better. That puts a counter on your whole team and then gives them Indestructible and Vigilance for that turn. This does get more interesting if you have tokens, as the power buff will be higher, just going wide, having more creatures. And then interestingly, that I do wonder if the legendary thing will come up, giving them +2/+1, and the ward 1 could be quite nice. Like there are plenty of cards that there are plenty of legendary cards that would want to go with this. Cards like, we've mentioned Adeline and Squee earlier. If you're running those instead of just normal Goblin Rabbitmaster and like Hanwig Garrison, then this could have a place. This doesn't go in every cube, but I could see cubes that kind of have a token sub theme, maybe picking this as their anthem of choice.
Yeah, I can see. I'm pretty high on this card, to be honest. I mean, the days are gone where Glorious Anthem used to be a good card in Powered Cube, but this is a whole mana cheaper for a meaningfully better effect. The Legends thing will come up. There's just a lot of Legends in those decks. All the way up the curve, you have your Kithian, Thalia, Adeline, and White Weenie decks do tend to go pretty wide. You can fall into a trap where you have too much of this stuff, obviously, and you can really only afford to have 1 or 2 of these cards that rely on you having a lot of other creatures in play, because their slots aren't taken up by cheap creatures. And you really do want your curve to be pretty low for this card to work out. But I think this is pretty solid, and it's a pretty resilient buff to your team. It will, if they sweep your board, you still have this anthems while your future creatures are better. And the ward 1, having these taxing effects does add up. Like it's now 3 mana to Fatal Push or Thalia. That's pretty obnoxious. Yeah, I think this card's pretty good in White Weenie, actually.
No, yeah, very cool. Yeah, I think it's what you said about finding the right spot for this, or how many of these you want to run. There is probably a place for just having an anthem in a lot of cubes in 2023. So maybe this could be the one.
Yeah, 100%. You're quite right, but I think it's not the card you want to be playing on turn 2, right? It's you want to go like 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 2-drop plus like anthem plus removal spell is pretty good, right?
No, exactly. And also I forgot Glorious Anthem was 1 white. I thought it was 2 and a white. So the fact that it's just it has the same restriction in terms of color pips, but it's just a mana cheaper. That is just good. It is a strictly better upgrade, I guess.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Glorious Anthem. Cool. Next up, we have Forge Anew. This is not a White Weenie card, fortunately. This is 2 and a white for an enchantment. When Forge Anew enters the battlefield, return target equipment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. As long as it's your turn, you may activate equip abilities anytime you could activate an instant, and you may pay 0 rather than pay the equip cost of the first equip ability you activate during each of your turns. I don't think I need to say this needs to go in an equipment deck, but this has a lot going on if you're doing the equipment thing. It doesn't go in your aggressive white deck that has 1 or 2 equipments in it. You really need to mean it. But the second two abilities are already really strong. The ability to equip at instant speed is surprisingly powerful. Anyone who's played with Leonin Shakiri can tell you it's you get to put it on the thing that they don't block and kill you, or you can put it on the thing they do block and win combat, and it makes combat an absolute nightmare for your opponent. It also makes like lightning greaves into you can't kill any of my creatures on my turn. This has quite a lot going on, I think, and that's before you even get to the top ability of maybe you're looting away your equipment, or they just counter it or deal with it in some way, and it's a nice reanimate for that. If you can find a way to put like a Cauldron Complete in your graveyard at the early turns, this could be really strong doing that. But and then the final ability is obviously great with things like Colourless Hammer that have a really high equip cost but are cheap to play. And that's, obviously these aren't things that exist in most cubes, but I think they're printing more and more equipment payoff seemingly every set. So I think at some point you reach that critical mass, and this could actually be like a pretty good thing for probably Boros to be doing in cubes, is including a like equipment payoff package. I think each time they print these things, it just gets more and more redundancy, and that does become quite a nice aggro deck that has a lot of resiliency. The equipment decks, because they they tend to be great against people just killing your creatures, because you can every creature you make is going to be a huge threat when you have this and some decent equipment in play.
No, definitely, yeah. If I'm honest, it's the top line of text that I'm most excited for. Like, this is another card that just kind of shows that I'm going to die on this hill, but I think Goblin Welder is the most improved Magic card for Cube in the last like 3 or 4 years. Because if you're doing fair things with this is not where you want to be with this. Specifically, you want to be looting away a Cauldron Complete or a Batterskull, effectively kind of making like a Boros equipment reanimator deck. That could be quite fun. And then, and the other flip side of this is, maybe this does make Hammer Time playable in Cube. I think that we've spoken about that kind of, I think, in every set review we've done, this kind of Boros equipment deck. And I'll be honest, it's normally me adding them, but you added this, James. So
yeah, I kind of think this is the best one we've had for a while. Like, so that's the downside of it's not a creature, but it just does it all. Like the paying 0 to equip at instant speed is going to be an absolute nightmare to play against.
Exactly. It is just the first time you equip it each of your turns, but that's normally enough for the dodging a removal spell. Say you've got your hammer, your Colossus Hammer on your creature, they try and kill it. The first time, effectively, they need 2 removal spells to not be hit by the hammer. That's pretty strong.
Yeah, for sure. And once you have the hammer in play, you're all of your creatures represent that extra 10 damage, right? Because you can you can move it after blocks.
Yeah, it could be pretty scary. I think that might be something we have to kind of have a look at and have a tinker with in the next couple of weeks, or in the next little period, because they have printed plenty of stuff for that deck recently, and we are probably reaching that point where it's a deck. So hooray, we love that. Next up, we have Frodo Determined Hero. It is 1 and a white for a legendary creature halfling warrior, and it is a 2/2. Whenever Frodo Determined Hero enters the battlefield or attacks, you may attach target equipment you control with mana value 2 or 3 to Frodo. As long as it's your turn, prevent all damage that would be dealt to Frodo. So I added this onto the list. For me, the top ability, the mana value 2 or 3, is kind of flavor text. That's not massively why I added it to the list, because it specifically doesn't cheat the 3 big things that we mentioned a minute ago. It doesn't cheat Batterskull, Cauldron Complete, or Hammer Time would be the main one to it. It only does the ones that realistically you're kind of already fine paying anyway. Like I'm not sure if there's even many equip 3s in Cube, but like a few equip 2s will get in your swords if people are running them, that kind of stuff. So that does help with that. For me, the main thing about this card is that this is effectively on your turn, it's a 2/2 indestructible creature. That's a pretty solid body. Like, it's less punchy than like cards like Adonto Vanguard or Seasoned Hallowblade, but it is way more consistent. Like, yes, you can't protect it on your opponent's turns, but on your turn, it will always be able to attack. It will always be able to be swinging through, and yes, your opponent can block it, but in theory, you're playing White Tweenie. Maybe you have your Anthem. Maybe you have other creatures you're attacking with. This is just going to be some free, repeatable source of damage every turn. I think Frodo Determined Hero is pretty solid, actually.
I get where you're coming from. I'm a little bit lower on this, I think. I think the Adante Vanguard comparison is a good one. I think I would almost always rather have the Vanguard, just because having that extra power both means it's harder to block profitably, and when it does get through, you're getting those extra points in. Obviously you don't have to play life with Frodo, which is nice, but Adante Vanguard being indestructible on both players' turn and is actual indestructible, whereas this is just preventing damage. You can still Doomblade Frodo. It doesn't stop that. I think just makes Vanguard a much trickier card to play against and to deal with. Whereas Frodo, I think, just being a 2/2, but there's a lot of things that will be able to block it pretty cleanly, even quite early on. Obviously you can't trade with it, but you can just put a 3/3 in front of it. It's not a huge issue. I think it's fine, but I think looking at the White Weenie 2-drops that are in most cubes, I don't think there's any I would cut for Frodo.
No, that's fair. Yeah, white 2-drops is quite a stacked section, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
It's quite hard to break into if you don't have either an aggressive ability, or I guess 3 power would probably help. But
yeah, the equipment thing I think isn't zero. But the things, as you say, the swords are pretty bad these days, and I don't think Frodo is going to be enough to get you to include them. Certainly, mostly looking at Umzawa Jete. If you're really going after the equipment deck as a an archetype, I'm just putting this into White Weenie, I think it gets a little bit better, but there are much better 2-drops for that deck as well. I think Pure Steel Paladin, Stoneforge Mystic, even I think Leonin Shakira is probably a better 2-drop for that deck actually than Frodo. But a bit of redundancy there is not a bad thing at all.
No, all good. You want to take it away with our second Frodo of the day?
I will. Our second and I believe final Frodo of the day is Frodo Sauron's Bane. It is white for a legendary creature halfling citizen. It is a 1/2. It says you can play 2 white-black hybrid mana. So white-white, white-black, or black-black. And if Frodo Sauron's Bane is a citizen, it becomes a halfling scout with base power and toughness 2/3 and lifelink. Means that ability permanently. Think of a Figure of Destiny type effect, and then if can play black, and if Frodo is a scout, so if you've activated the first ability, then it becomes a halfling rogue with whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game if the ring has tempted you 4 or more times this game, otherwise the ring tempts you. So the idea here, right, is that if you're going to the third stage, if that's what you're about, you're making a 2/3 lifelink. You need to get in that. You need to then play your black, get in with your 2/3. That needs to connect. Then the ring tempts you, and now your 2/3 is harder to block because you have the skulk ability, and you can just keep getting in with that, and eventually they lose the game, and you're looting all the time, I guess. That seems really unlikely to happen to me. Firstly, what Orzhov deck is this going in? I don't know what the deck looks like that wants this low impact, low statted single white 1-drop, and then can make black early in the game. That doesn't seem achievable to me. And then if you discount the third ability, then if you just activate the first one, then you've paid 3 mana for 2/3 lifelink. No, thank you. And then even if you do get to flip it, you've by this stage you've invested 6 mana. They can just Fatal Push the thing. They can still block it. It's not actually that difficult to block a 2/3 Skulk. I don't get it. I really don't get it. I might be wrong. Hopefully but it'd be cool to have this photo be good, but I don't really see it.
No, I completely agree. I really want to like this card, but yeah, it's if you're in any kind of white deck, I think you'd probably just rather spend the 3 mana you could be spending to get a 2/3 lifelink on 3 generic 2/1s.
Yeah,
and just have 6 power on the board on turn 2 rather than do this. So I will say there is something for this. Is one of the very few ways of getting repeatable ring temptation.
I don't believe activating the black ability multiple times gives you multiple ring tempts, because the black ability is if Frodo is a scout. Once it's resolved once, Frodo is no longer a scout. It is now a halfling rogue.
Oh, it's even worse. Okay. Oh, so you already have to actually this is terrible. You already have to be tempted multiple times before you get to this point. You have to be tempted 3 times. Okay, this is awful. All right, my bad.
Yeah, so I think you have to hit them like
oh no.
Yeah, you have to hit them like 4 times with Frodo.
Well, this card is way worse. If I'm honest, don't play Frodo Sauron's Bane, I think is the hot take from this, because even in my magical Christmas land, it doesn't work. So, okay, let's move on to a much better magic card. We're going to move on to Reprieve. It is 1 white for an instant to return target spell to its owner's hand and draw a card. So this is White Remand. It's technically different. I'm not going to use the words better, but it is different. So this gets around effects that say spells can't be countered, that kind of stuff. Then there are niche things the other way where it doesn't get the benefit for something like Baral that kind of reduces the costs of counter spells. But anyway, this is a very good card. This is probably one of the best cards in the set. If you played with Remand, the tempo swing that you get from it is fantastic. You brick your opponent's turn while you get to draw a card. All that for just 2 mana. And the fact that this is in white, people will not be expecting this effect. Just like imagine, like this is not a super hard situation to kind of imagine that you are a white deck that's beating down your opponent. Your opponent casts the Wrath the turn before they would die to stabilize. You do this to it, they can't cast it again, and you win the game. Like, that is not a super hard circumstance to imagine. But yeah, this is just a very good Magic card. We've had this in my cube since the day it was spoiled. Literally, the moment it was spoiled, this was printed and went into my cube. It's also an uncommon, so it has a place, I think, in every cube that can run it. James, what's your take on this card? And do you think it's fair of me to say that this is effectively a staple now?
Yeah, this card's phenomenal. It's and really unique in white. I think White Weenie is probably its best home. If you've ever played with or against the White Weenie, splashing a little bit of blue for some counter spells was a very good deck in a lot of cubes.
Yes, the James and Josh special. I think that's known as.
Yeah. Well, you curve out, and the thing is, the aggressive white decks, they generally just need that one turn. If you can stop your opponent stabilizing for that one turn, you get to kill them, right? And this lets you do that without going outside of white, without stretching your mana base. And that's a really big deal because aggressive decks don't want to splash. You need white on turn 1. You often need white on turn 2. So getting access to this effect in within your base white color, I think for your White Weenie, there are remarkably few cards you would take over this. I think this is pretty phenomenal, actually.
Yeah, I know plenty of people who have taken this pack 1 pick 1 in my just below like vintage power level cube. Like, it's a very, very good card.
Yeah, I think that's generally going to be a pretty reasonable decision.
All right, awesome. Do you want to take it away with our last white card, James?
Cool, yeah. So finally in white, we have Samwise the Stout-Hearted. This is 1 white for a legendary creature, halfling peasant. It is a 2/1 with flash, and when Samwise the Stout-Hearted enters the battlefield, choose up to one target permanent card in your graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn. Return it to your hand, and the ring tempts you. Okay, so this could be a nice little value creature, I think. You can sort of think about it as a Snapcaster Mage for creatures. It's nice that it works at it's not gated by the size of the creature, as a lot of these are, or the mana cost. It's whenever one of your creatures dies, you can flash in Samwise as a little raised dead. You have a body that can trade or get in, or you will find some utility for. The ring tempts you, I don't think matters very much here. It's going to be a rare situation because this is only one instance of the ring tempting you, so it's basically give a creature skulk. Obviously, you can come up with situations where it will matter and it's upside, it doesn't hurt, but I don't think it's a big part of the power level of the card. I think this mostly wants to go in, obviously, creature-based decks, but probably not the fastest. I don't think you want this in White Weenie because it's not the... on turn 2, this is not the 2-drop you want, right? It's mostly just going to be a 2-mana 2-1. That's not good enough. And later in the game, well, I'd rather be playing my Gideon on turn 4 than playing this guy for a bit of incremental value. But I think it kind of has a home in maybe more mid-rangey white decks. It's also worth noting you can get value out of this earlier. For example, like you can get back a fetch land with this. You can get back a bauble with this. There's a lot of ways to where you can run out on turn 2 and get your card right away, which is nice, but obviously just makes it a bit more flexible. I don't think this adds up to like the most powerful card in the world. I think it's gonna be like a niche role player, but I think it's fine. I think you'll find decks for it.
So I think I'm actually a little higher on this than you are. Just like a 2/1 flash body, I think is pretty solid. Like I don't think it's too hard to like imagine a situation where you flash this in on like turn 2 or 3 to block their creature coming at you, and yeah, you save your fetch land for their turn. If you're just doing that, if that's kind of like I don't think that scenario is super uncommon. If I'm honest with you, I think will come up quite a bit of time, and that seems pretty good for me. Like there's also the thing of kind of like obviously the higher case scenario of this could like protect your creature combo piece. You could bring it back to your hand if they remove it, that kind of thing. I think that's pretty solid. For me, kind of, I think the things are, especially in Cube, just like the creature types is going to be quite difficult. Like, no deck cares about a halfling peasant. Like, humans or soldiers or like warriors would be a bit nicer. But the legendary thing might mean it has a bit more play. I guess you can Caracas this back to your hand to do it again, which could be quite cool. But
that's really good, actually.
That could be quite fun. And then obviously we do have the, I guess, dream scenario of just like strip mining them repeatedly with this. Like double strip them with this.
Yeah, that's not bad. It's pretty phenomenal with Urza Saga as well, actually.
Ooh, there we go.
Because the second Urza Saga is kind of better than the first one,
Yeah.
right? It's it starts making 6/6s, 7/7s. Yeah, I could kind of see it being one of those cards where it has enough little things going on that you end up running it quite a lot. Yeah, certainly if you have enough fetch lands that you're going to be able to reliably get a card out of it on turn 2, it goes up a fair bit. Because I think you don't want to be playing it just as Ambush Viper too often.
No, exactly. You want to be getting a bit more value out of it than that. And yeah, ideally, I guess you do want to have another creature in play, like if you're doing the chump block thing. But because otherwise, if you block with this and it dies, you will have a ring token on. Or a ring emblem on level 1, but you won't have anything to put it on. You need to be tempted again to actually put it back onto something. Yeah, that part. Yeah, the ring tempts you. I think is probably going to be flavor text 90% of the time. But yeah, I'm actually tempted to try Sam. I might give this little chap a go.
Okay, that's fair. Sounds cool.
All right, well, let's move on to our first blue card. We're going to be talking about Birthday Escape. It is a single blue for a sorcery. Draw a card, and the ring tempts you. So. Cantrips are cantrips. Cubes run these just as way as they do just trigger so many things. Like they trigger your pyromancer effects. There's a spell in the graveyard for delve, all that kind of stuff. This is probably the worst one, I want to say. If you have more Ring Temptation, then this obviously goes up, but this is gonna be tricky when you're just comparing it, because like all the other single blue cantrips do something else. Like they scry, they can draw you multiple cards. They just give you way more card selection, or some of them even mill you as well, which certain decks want more than this. I think Birthday Escape is a bit of a hard sell. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier, I guess, of a card that's underpowered, and in theory, the bonus is the Ring Tempt You. In Cube, just having a couple of these, I don't think is going to be enough to make it work. And also, this also kind of it isn't as good because the Ring Tempting You is not as like blue is not specifically is generically known as the aggro value beatdown color, that kind of thing. So I think the Ring Temptation has less play in those colors. There will be some creatures that will be good in it, but generally speaking, I think this one's probably a pass.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. There's just quite a lot of blue 1-mana cantrips. You're not going to run all of them, and it's pretty hard to make an argument for this over really any of the others. No, even some of the weak ones. Like a lot of cubes don't go down to like sleight of hand, right? For example, they just have preordained ponder, maybe opt, but even sleight of hand is generically a much stronger card than this.
No, definitely. Like if I'm honest, like so mine currently we have Brainstorm, Consider, Opt, Thought Scour, Careful Study, Ponder, Preordain. So that is what 6 there. Like there might be a world where if you're in a 720 cube, this could get in as like the 7th one. If you're looking for it and you like Lord of the Rings, maybe that could be the way it goes.
Liking Lord of the Rings is certainly a valid argument for it. It's also worth noting, I was talking about Dreadhorde Arcanist earlier. This is kind of the card I had in mind. It's
really nice. Okay.
It is phenomenal. If you have Arcanist in play and you cast this, you get your card. You attack for Arcanist. You get another card. Your Arcanist has a free attack now because it is a 1/3 Skulk. Your attack swing with Arcanist, you get your second card. You get your Ring Tempt again, so your Arcanist now becomes a looter with Skulk. And then in subsequent turns, you can use that looting to set up for Arcanist that attacks even. It's pretty nice there. Because Arcanist is a card where a large part of the weakness of that card is it's quite easy to block normally. So I think that's quite a nice interaction. But I don't think that's really enough to justify including it over a generically better cantrips in most cubes.
Oh, maybe not in cube, but maybe modern, James. Let's go.
Maybe modern.
Maybe modern.
Yeah, that sounds. I could throw away some play points with that idea. Yeah. Yeah. Next up, we have Fealty to the Realm. It is 4 and a blue for an enchantment aura. Enchant creature. When Fealty of the Realm enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. And the monarch controls enchanted creature. And finally, enchanted creature attacks each combat if able and can't attack you. So you, in this case, being the person who cast and therefore owns Fealty of the Realm, not the person who controls the creature at the time. Yeah, this is pretty good. The same things that go along with all Monarch cards basically apply here. Introducing the monarchy into the game is you have to be confident that is going to work out well for you. If you introduce the monarchy and you can't defend the monarchy, that can be an absolute disaster. That can 100% lose you games you would otherwise have won. But this does go a long way towards doing that. It's you're gaining control of their best creature, and even if they do take monarchy back, that creature can't be used to attack you. But once they have the monarchy back, it is going to be fairly tough because that creature can't attack you, but that means it can be back on block, so it could then be very hard to get the monarchy back. But if you have this backed up with good cheap removal, so you don't get hit by their creatures, or other cheap evasive creatures, so that you can take Monarchy back if they do happen to take it. This can be a really strong card for sure. I'd say the only knock against it is if you're looking for a 5-mana mind control, it's really hard to look past Treachery. Treachery is like a significantly stronger card than this in terms of just how swingy it is on turn 5. It's 5 mana is essentially 0 mana steal your creature, which is insane. But you don't have to necessarily go for the most powerful option at each slot. This is an interesting card with some cool gameplay, I think. So very reasonable and includes.
No, definitely, yeah. I do quite like this card, but yeah, like I do completely agree that just in terms of raw power level, like Treachery is super strong. I know Bribery is 1 more, I think, but obviously the effect is way stronger.
Bribery is 5 as well.
Bribery is 5, but okay, I stand by Bribery as a miserable Magic card. I'm not a big fan of that one. I think one of the main things, if I'm honest with you, is like this is very splashable, unlike Treachery and Bribery, and like even like some of the other ones, like just generic mind control and stuff. But one of the things that this has going for it is like cards like Treachery are like $50 now.
That's an excellent point.
So like if this stays relatively budget, because obviously it was printed in the Commander precons, so it's currently you can get one. Well, the set hasn't come out at time of recording, so the prices are very weird. It's somewhere between 61 cents and $5, but as a relatively budget option, I think this one could be quite cool. And also just generally the Monarch is introducing that into games has in the past been quite strong. So
yeah, 100%. And in the deck that wants Monarch cards, this is going to be really strong. It's just worth noting there are going to be plenty of blue decks that don't want that effect.
No, definitely. Yeah. You do need, I guess, introducing the Monarchy into a game. If you don't have that many creatures, that seems like a good way to give your opponent some card advantage.
Sure is.
All right, let's move on to our next and last blue card. We have Stern Scolding. It is a single blue for an instant. Counter target creature spell with power or toughness 2 or less. So I think this card actually does quite a lot. I did a quick check, and this counters somewhere between half to 2/3 of the creatures in my cube. And that is a massive amount for just a single blue mana. So I currently don't actually have a single mana blue counterspell in my cube. We obviously have the free ones with Force of Will and Force of Negation, and then everything else is kind of at 2. Obviously Daze is also technically free, I guess. But yeah, I don't have many counterspells at 1, and this one could be quite interesting. Like, because this hits more than I thought it did, I think this one could see a place. Also, when I did that check, realizing that 2/3 of the creatures in my cube die to shock means I should probably just be running shock as well. But that's a separate conversation, I think.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the fact that it's power or toughness 2 or less really does open up the scope here. Like, it basically is going to counter most things that cost 3 or less, and even some more expensive stuff.
And also like Kiki Jiki as well.
Yeah, Kiki Jiki, Solitude, an Agent of Treachery. It's got some range,
As a Lord High Artificer has 1 power.
Sure does. Yeah, no, I think this is a pretty strong card. It is pretty matchup dependent. I think you can view this as if you'd want Fatal Push in your deck in the matchup, you probably want this.
That's a good shout.
But it is it lets you do a thing that blue normally doesn't get to do. You get to if you have this on turn 1, this is gonna stop you falling behind to creature decks. In a way that almost no other blue card does, not counting Dismember as a blue card here. It does kind of fill that role.
Dismember's a 5-color card, and we all know that.
Yeah, one of which is blue. Yeah, it's but yeah, no, I think this card's really good actually. Yeah, obviously you don't want it in every matchup, but I think it's certainly a card that I'm defaulting to. I'll start in my main deck and just board out when it's bad. I certainly wouldn't categorize it as a sideboard card.
No, it makes sense. Yeah, this It's another one that I kind of, the more I think about it, the more I actually probably need to test. But yeah, I think Stern Scalding looks good.
Yeah, no, it's a nice one. Cool. So first up in black, we have Call of the Ring. This is 1 black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, the ring tempts you. And whenever you choose a creature as your ring bearer, you may pay 2 life. If you do, draw a card. So the tricky bit here is you get the ring tempts you regardless. You're going to move up your ring emblem, but you're not getting the card unless you choose something as your ring bearer. So you're not getting the card if you don't have a creature in play. That sort of limits how limits the decks this goes in pretty strongly. I think ideally you want 1-drops in your deck in decent numbers. It could be fine in a deck where you play this, you don't get the card right away, and then you play a creature afterwards, and hopefully that survives. But I think ideally to maximize this, you want 1-drops in your deck. I don't really know where this belongs. Like, sure, if you have like black aggro in your cube, then maybe this is good, but those decks suck. So I don't know really where we end up. Maybe it's, if you've got like vampires in or something. Yeah, I don't think you want this really if you're not getting your cards until later. It is also worth noting here that it's 2 life. 2 life is quite a lot, especially as a lot of the decks who would want this use their life total in other ways as well. 2 life adds up really quickly. The difference between 2 for this or like 1 for Bitter Blossom, for example, is pretty real. But I mean, it is a powerful effect if you get the train rolling early, and it will be pretty strong because you're buffing your creature a pretty meaningful amount. This will very reliably get you multiple ring tempts on 1 card. That's actually pretty. There's not a lot of cards that do that. So if you kind of want the ring tempt mechanic in your cube, there's quite a nice way to do it, because it honestly doesn't play super well if you just doing it once. You do need those multiple instances of it. So it makes your creatures into better threats whilst drawing you cards. If you have the cheap creatures in play, that is quite strong. But it's just finding the right home for it, I think.
No, I think that's fair. So I did want to ask you actually. So how do you think this compares to a card like Phyrexian Arena? Because I had a look on Cube Cobra, and apparently Phyrexian Arena is played in 30% of cubes above 541 in size, which is a little bit mad to me. But how do you think it compares to that?
I think when it's good, it's better. You're getting it for less mana, and you're buffing a creature, right? But it just goes in much fewer decks. Like, you can play Phyrexian Arena in your really grindy mid-range deck with a bunch of removal spells and discard and grind them out with a card advantage. This doesn't do that, because if you don't have a creature in play, you're not getting the cards. If you're only playing like 1 creature in the early turns, they can just kill that creature, and then they've kind of killed your Call of the Ring as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. It's a Phyrexian Arena that can be turned off, which I guess is not the reason you play that.
Yeah, for sure. But it could be nice potentially, I guess, as well in you can make aristocrats decks that have a decent chunk of 1-drops and like just churn out a lot of bodies, right? Like, this is actually nice with like Bitter Blossom and stuff, because once you're churning out sort of multiple bodies off single cards, you're always going to have something to choose. So I was going to be able to get your cards if you want. But again, that brings the downside of, Bitter Blossom is also costing you a life a turn. How many times can you afford to do this? Yeah, I think when it's good, it's better than Arena. I will say I think Arena has been power crept a little bit out of a lot of cubes. I would not say it's better on average than Dark Confidant, for example.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like you probably take the same amount of life loss from both, but Dark Confidant also attacks and blocks, so that can be important.
It is worth noting you can just choose not to pay the life later. The life is optional.
Yes, that's true.
So it doesn't kill you in the way Dark Confidant does, but obviously at that point all you're getting is a ring tempt every turn, which isn't necessarily good enough.
No, exactly, and yeah, as you mentioned at the start, like once you're past, like this is one of the best ways to reliably complete or ultimate a ring, as it were. But once you've got past the fourth one, you don't need that anymore, basically. I guess there could be some play of it being nice, being able to move the ring around a lot. Like if you play a better creature, you know you're going to be guaranteed to move it around. But at that point, just if you played a better creature, just kill them with that creature. But
yeah, for sure.
All right, let's move on to our next black card. We have Golem Patient Plotter. It is 1 black for a 3/1 legendary creature, Halfling Horror. When Golem Patient Plotter leaves the battlefield, the ring tempts you, and it has a black. Sacrifice a creature, return Golem from your graveyard to your hand, activate only as a sorcery. So I don't think this goes in more high-powered level cubes, but this is an uncommon. And in Peasant Cube, I think this is actually really, really good. It's a recursive, black aggressive creature, which you don't tend to get at uncommon. Most of the ones that have seen played in Cube are rares, like your Bloodghasts, all that kind of stuff. They're generally all rares. We generally don't see these effects at uncommon. So at that level, this will see a lot of play. It's also a sack outlet as well. It is a slow sack outlet, but just having more density on top of a body that I guess you also want it to die as well. So it fills multiple roles in an aristocratic deck. Could be quite strong. And then the other thing I was thinking about with this card is in those cubes, the first level of giving Skulk to a creature could be very impactful. There's cards like Bloodthrone Vampire, which is 1 black for a 1/1 that lets you sack a creature to give it +2/+2. If you give that Skulk, which is in the deck that would want to be running Golem, that is very scary because you can, with those kind of cards that have low mana value to start with, but you sack your board to them, you can get through unblocked and then sack all your board to them, and it kind of gives you like a one-shot kill. So in those kind of cubes, I think the ring tempts you could be quite good, and I think Golem is a very solid role player in that. Like I do think it is a niche card. Like you need those bits for it to work, but I think in Peasant Cube this could be a staple going forward.
Yeah, I could see that in Peasant Cube actually. It sounds pretty great. I like that both of the abilities here basically ask your deck to have the same things. Because you have to sacrifice a creature to bring Golem back, which asks you to have disposable, so presumably low-powered creatures, and those creatures coincidentally make good ring bearers as well. Because Golem itself, not a great ring bearer, it's got 3 power, but those, the random tokens that you presumably are making to try to enable your Golem engine, those will make good ring bearers. It is kind of nice Golem being a 3/1 because obviously you get the ability when Golem leaves the battlefield, and then you can use the second ability to bring him back. He doesn't innately sacrifice himself to keep that engine going, but being a 3/1 is 3/1s trade. They can't keep taking 3. So at some point they're probably going to have to either trade for your 3/1 or even just eat it if you just want the ring tempting ability. Yeah, like not the quickest card in the world. It's I think comparing it to the other black recursive creatures, I think they have very different roles, because this doesn't put you up a creature, right? When you recur it, you're sacking a creature to bring back a creature. So it's not really an enabler for other sacrifice things in the way that a Bloodghast is.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
And the fact that it comes to hand and then to play means it's this isn't really an aggressive card because it is pretty slow, but it is going to be a lot of value. It's I think it's going to be quite good in the more grindy sacrifice decks where you're getting your value every turn, you're chipping in with your ring bearer, you're looting, and then you start dealing them damage. And in those aristocrat decks, they're really good at trip damage, so that damage is quite meaningful.
No, it makes sense. Yeah. The little I've played of the Lord of the Rings format, I've had Golem in both my decks, like in the Streamers Showdown thing we did and a pre-release, and I was impressed with it. It plays better than I think it reads, if that makes sense. Like I think if this is in your deck and you're doing the things that like the aristocratic stuff that we kind of mentioned, I think you will be happy with it.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Cool. Next up, we have Golem's Bite. This is black for an instant. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. So we have a Disfigure already. And it has an activated ability. For 3 and a black, you can exile Golem's Bite from your graveyard. The ring tempts you, activate only as a sorcery. So this is a strictly better disfigure. There's not really any scenarios where having that ability on the card is going to hurt you. It is a very, very slightly better disfigure. The upside is pretty minor, but disfigure is a very fine card. It's probably is worse than Fatal Push, but it's definitely on the next tier of if you want another single black removal spell. Disfigure's probably one. This I guess replaces that. So yeah, this is a very solid role player. Nothing bad to say about it. Not the most exciting thing in the world. It's not going to deal with big creatures, but it's going to kill the Llanowar elves. It can kill a Ragavan. It does everything you expect your 1-mana removal spell to do.
No, exactly. Yeah, completely agree. If you're playing Disfigure, swap it out for Golem's Bite unless you're Pauper, because Disfigures are common. That's the only thing. But it just gives you slightly more to do. Like, yeah.
Or you're a Lord of the Rings hater.
Cool. Let's take it away with our next black card. Next, we have Mirkwood Bats. It is 3 and a black for a 2/3 creature bat with flying, and whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. So this is a very good creature. It's also a common, which is kind of a bit wild. There are just generally so many things that make tokens in Cube, either like creatures, which was obviously like the age-old one, but now there's so many sets where things make treasure, things make clues, things make food, things make blood, things make power stones. Well, there's more than I actually can think of. They are everywhere. So there's plenty of things to make tokens, and what's nice is that a lot of those tokens will sack themselves. I think this is a very strong card. The main drawback with it is that it is a 4-mana black creature, which means it's competing against like Grief and Shieldred and Yawgmoth. I think it's a good card, and I think in like the fact this could be tearing up Pauper cubes is kind of scary, actually. I think for more powerful cubes, this is my take. I think this card is good, but I'm someone who's currently running the artifacts sack section in black, and I'm not sure I want this. I think just because it's 4 mana, and that spot is very competitive.
Yeah, I think this has sort of got some crossover hype because people are very excited for it in Commander.
Oh, it'll be a house in Commander, yeah.
Yes. Each opponent is a scary line of text there. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fine card. I can see you doing some pretty sweet stuff with it. Like, if your deck has like Disciple of the Vault in it, then this is going to be a pretty good card for you. But it's 4 mana. It dies to a lightning bolt. It's a lot of the time isn't going to do anything the turn you play it, right? If you play this on turn 4, a lot of the ways you're either making or often ways you're sacrificing those tokens going to require a mana investment, so it's not doing anything until you untap with it. I don't think this is a remotely comparable card to Shieldred, for example, on power level of the ones you said. Yeah, there's some combo stuff, but it's to actually go infinite. This is it's not the easiest thing in the world. I think this is a little bit overhyped for Cube personally. I could see it having some spots, but I think for powerful cubes, this is probably just too expensive for not enough immediate impact, would be my hunch.
Yeah, no. I think we're both kind of aligned with that take. But yeah. I think this will, in Pauper, this will see play, like maybe even Peasant too. But yeah, once you start being able to run rares, again, it's just like it is a good Magic card, but it's competing against the last 3 years worth of Mythics, and that's kind of the issue.
Cool. Next up, we have one I added to the list. This is Mordor Muster. It is 1 black for a sorcery. It says you draw a card and lose a life, and you amass Orcs 1. Is this for the first time we've met amass Orcs? similar to the amass mechanic from, I believe, War of the Spark. Except the only difference being that we are now amassing orcs. So you put a +1/+1 counter on an army you control. It's also an orc. If you don't control an army, create a 0/0 black orc army token first. So if you've already amassed, if you control an army, you're just going to put a counter on it. And if you don't control an army, you make a 1/1. So this isn't... So 2-mana 1/1 draw a card is a card we've seen a bunch of times. In green, you've got Elvish Visionary. In white, you've got Spirited Companion. And in black, you've got Dusk Legion Zealot, I believe the card is. 2-mana 1/1 lose life, draw a card.
Yeah, the vampire. That's it.
Yeah. The difference with this one is that it's a sorcery, not a creature. There's obviously upsides and downsides to that. You're not going to be able to flicker it, which you might want to with some of those cards. But there's also a bunch of upsides where you can flash it back for Snapcaster Mage. It can contribute to all of your spells synergies. Anything that counts instances sorceries in the graveyard, for example. And I like this as maybe a nice little crossover card between, say you have blue-black spells in your cube, but you also have red-black sacrifice. Well, this is going to be pretty good in both of those decks. So it could be a nice little glue card there. Yeah, not the most powerful, exciting card in the set, but I think could be a nice role player.
No, definitely. Like, I'm actually kind of a fan of the creature on a spell that gives you some value. Like, one of my unashamedly favorite cube cards is Hard Evidence, the one that makes you the 0/3 crab and you investigate.
Oh yeah, I love it.
Like with that you get 2 tokens, but with this you get the card draw straight away, which is nice. Like I've been impressed by Hard Evidence when I've run it, and I could see this filling that role. Like, it's just a solid creature. Oh no, it's just a solid card. Like, it just smooths out your draws, makes things a little bit easier for your deck, gives you a body. Like, yeah, I think it's solid. Okay, next up we have Orcish Bowmasters. It is 1 black for a 1/1 creature orc archer. It has flash, and when Orcish Bowmasters enter the battlefield, and whenever an opponent draws a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, Orcish Bowmaster deals 1 damage to any target, then amass 1. So this is a silly magic card. It's very good. My first thought of where this could go is something like the wheel deck, but I don't think it needs to go in that. I think the higher power level the cube, the better this is going to get. Where people are playing more like cantrips, you have things like Monarch drawing cards, all this kind of stuff. There is a world, though, where this is just fine. Like, not all decks do have extra card draw. This does just get rolled over by Stompy. You do get some value from it straight away. Like, it does ping something and make a body straight away. Like, this is 2 mana, ping something for 1, make another 1/1 as well. Like, the fact you get value. Like, I'm not saying this is a bad card at all, but like, Cube is not Legacy. Like, not everyone's running 4 copies of Brainstorm. I think this is a very good card, but I think it is probably still a slam dunk in my cube, but I don't think it, like, this is probably the card I think most people are hyped about from the set, just in terms of just raw power level. I would agree it's a strong card, but I think people need to kind of lower the expectations a little bit. It'll play very well.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. I think it is going to be contextually very good in a lot of spots, though. Like, the fact you get that ping on ETB means it's not just good against the people who draw a bunch of extra cards. It's also good against the Llanowar Elf people, and it's good against the Ragavan people. It's a lot of decks are going to have either be drawing extra cards or have good X1s to target, right? And then also you can have synergies within your own deck, right? If you're, for example, playing the Sacrifice deck, this is 2 bodies for 2 mana that gets you some amount of value. Yeah, I think the card's definitely strong. It's I wouldn't have it down as maybe the slam dunk people might think, extrapolating from a format like Legacy, where I think the hype probably is deserved. But yeah, certainly a strong card. Even if you don't really have any synergies with it, I think it's a good card. And there are definitely ways you can build around it to make it better, whether that be wheels or just a way to get extra bodies out of a card. Also, even nice with something like Dak Faden, you can just target them with the plus. They draw 2, discard 2, and you kill that creature. It's pretty good.
I think a lot of the hype around this card just comes from like we've all been hurt by Nekasar and Commander. We've all seen what those things can do.
Yeah. Some of us repeatedly.
Yes.
Nice. Next up, we have Moria Marauder. This is red for a creature goblin warrior. It's a 1/1 double strike. And it says, whenever a goblin or orc you control deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. If you're obviously, I don't think this is good enough as just a 1/1. If I hit you, I get to exile the top 2 and play them. Like that card will win some games, but is just a bit fragile. It's going to be too hard to get it through most of the time. But if you're in the goblins deck, which is a real deck for people putting cubes, it's red black goblins or mono red goblins is kind of a classic cube archetype. This can really go off. It's very notable. A lot of these cards now say whenever 1 or more goblins deal combat damage to your opponent. This does not say that. If you hit them with 5 goblins, you will exile the top 5, and you can play any number of them. That will run away with games pretty quickly. So it is only until end of turn. You see some of these effects now until the end of your next turn. So, and that means it's, you can't play this on turn 2 and hit them with your 1-drop goblin and immediately get value because you probably can't play the card right away. But later in the game, this is just going to make every time you get through with a goblin, you're really going to start snowballing and never missing land drops. I think this is a really good card for goblin. I think this is one of the better goblin playoffs you can have. I think, especially at 2 mana, this is really strong. It's notable it's red. If your goblin's deck is red black, you have to work a bit for this. You need the fixing, but yeah, I think it's well worth it. I think it's a really strong goblin payoff.
No, exactly, and so I agree with all that, but I do think this is going to go in a cube with goblins, but the deck that it goes in after that doesn't necessarily, I think, have to be a full goblin deck because this has double strike. If this gets through, you will get to play the 2 cards, and if you the floor for a 2-mana 1/1 double strike is quite low. Like if you have any way of buffing this power, if you can put a counter on it, if you can give it a bit of equipment, then it's going to hit like a truck. It's going to be very tricky for it to deal with it. So yeah, it gets in a cube if you have goblins, but in the draft environment, it doesn't necessarily just have to be in the goblin deck, which I think is some nice flexibility because if you just read this as a aggressive creature that effectively draws you 2 cards on a turn, that's still very solid.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah, I think it's a lot better, even if you're not in the goblin deck. It's very meaningfully better if you have, say, 4 or 5 goblins in your deck to having 0 or 1 other goblins. But yeah, I mean, certainly, yeah, but the times you can get it through, maybe you have a lot of removal, you can get their blockers out of the way. Still exiling 2 cards, that is plenty. Yeah, for sure.
No, definitely. Well, from one card that cares about goblins to a card you are running specifically if you don't care about goblins, we're talking about Rally at the Hornburg. It is a 1 red for a sorcery. When you cast it, you create 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens. Humans you control gain haste until end of turn. So we've seen plenty of effects that 1 red for a sorcery that makes 2 tokens. Generally, things like Krenko's Command you might see in goblin decks kind of like overlap with like the spells meta decks that we mentioned earlier. This is kind of fills the same slot. Like if you have a red blue red black or kind of like a Grixis kind of spellsy matters deck, and you also happen to have a human deck, then this is a very solid role player. It does two things that you want, so therefore it can be worth a cube slot for those reasons.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, even something like, red, white, or Naya tokens could use something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're running the Krenko's command stuff now and you don't care about them being goblins, you just want 2 tokens for 2 mana, well, this is just better, right? Because they come with haste. Or there was the one from Ikoria where one of them has haste.
Oh, yes, that's it, yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it like a human and a beast or something like that?
Yeah, some weird creature type for the other one. Yeah, this is better than that card. It'll have its niche. Not one for most cubes, but one to be aware of for sure. All right, next up we have Spiteful Banditry. This is X red for an enchantment. When Spiteful Banditry enters the battlefield, it deals X damage to each creature. And whenever one or more creatures your opponents control die, you create a treasure token. This ability triggers only once each turn. So, as just a board wipe to kill everything, this is pretty expensive, right? This is 4 mana for a Pyroclasm. It's 5 mana for an Anger of Gods. However, scaling board wipes where you get to choose the value are really powerful, because you get to set it up in a way where, maybe you trade off your low toughness creatures, and then you get to banditry away their multiple X2s and X1s, whilst you're left with some free toughness creatures. And that's really good. Like, anyone who's played with Meathook Massacre, this is the closest red gets to it. It also will almost always make you a treasure when you cast it, and then continue to generate some amount of treasures throughout the game. The fact this is gated to only once each turn, I mean, it's like, I think you're not in it for the treasure. That's not like a synergy piece you're after. It's not sort of an engine in that way, because one treasure is just not going to be enough if that's really what you're going for. But it will be nice incidental value. And I think this is fine. It's weirdly, I think you kind of want it in a deck with creatures, because, well, if you don't have creatures of your own, then you'd rather just be playing like Anger of the Gods or Pyroclasm or whatever. But I can also see it in, like, maybe you have a red-green deck where you have some beefy stuff. You want to be able to use this. Maybe you kill some of that small creatures whilst you keep your larger ones. I kind of suspect it ends up just being a bit too expensive, mana-wise, for what you're getting out of it. And you'd rather just have something you can cast a turn earlier. But I think it's not an unreasonable one to try.
No, I think that's fair. I think at some point this definitely did not have the text, this ability triggers only once each turn on it. I think this was definitely like, let's make the red Meathook Massacre, and then they realized that would be awful. Or no, that'd be very, very good and a bit too busted. This won't make you anywhere near as much treasures as you actually want, because if you're at a point in these decks where you are removing a creature every turn, then you're probably already winning. Like, you're not going to be using your removal till like in theory, this will kind of this is a board wipe that sets you up a little bit, and by little bit I mean 1 mana. It gives you a Lotus Petal for the next turn. That might not be good enough.
Yeah. And the thing is, if there's just going to be too many spots where they have, if they have a 4/4, this is 6 mana before you can kill it. I think there are just going to be a few too many spots where you'll just wish you had something a bit more efficient.
No, exactly. And just traditionally, like, I don't think I've ever run a board wipe in red. It's not something that color particularly wants you to be doing. Like, it's of all my colors in cube, I think red is probably like second or third in terms of most likely to be committing creatures to the board. Like, obviously, like, green is probably first because you have all the mana dorks and that kind of stuff. That's kind of a big part of what it's trying to do. But red's not too far behind this in terms of, you want to be putting stuff on the board. Do you actually want a board wipe in your deck?
Yeah,
I think will come up quite a bit of the time. Like, maybe like Chunky Boros. maybe that's actually where this goes.
I mean, I think if its best home is Chunky Boros, we can probably
Yeah.
probably safely consign this one to the scrap heap.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean, like, blue red will occasionally run a board white, but then, like, I don't see an upside really of this over, just a pyroclasm in that deck.
Yeah, let's move on to our first green card of the day. We have Delighted Halfling. Is a single green for a 1/2 creature halfling citizen. It taps for a colorless, and it also taps to add 1 mana of any color, but you can spend that mana only to cast a legendary spell. And quite importantly, when you do it that way, that spell can't be countered. So this is another just very solid, very good card. The bar for a single mana dork is very low. Importantly, this isn't a mana dork that you want in your classic mono green decks, though, because it doesn't really. It doesn't help you cast your next mana dork or things like that. And also, just green doesn't really traditionally have that many legendaries. Like mono green does not really have that many legendaries that you actually want to be ramping out. So this, for me anyway, is a card that is mainly for those 3-4 color decks that have green as their base for like their fixing, that kind of stuff. This is going into a green based deck where you want to be casting like 3 mana Teferi or like Okos if you're running that. And like if you're on the 4 color Omnath deck, then I think this goes in that as well, just a way of getting some of your more higher impact multicolored spells down. And also in those decks, just the ability to fix all your mana for your most impactful spells and to be able to get through counter magic as well. It's just going to be very, very strong. I would say that kind of I think there is probably a conversation to be had about kind of what the tier list of these are. I probably say this is probably like the 4th or 5th best mana dork. I think I would put both Hierarchs above this and Birds of Paradise just consistently. So then it's kind of like, is it this, or do you want like Jorga Tree Speaker or something like that as your next one in cube anyway? But even with it going there, it's still probably going to get played in every cube that's bigger than a 360, I would say. I think this might just be another auto-include going forward, or as close as there is to one nowadays.
Yeah, I'm really hyped about this card, actually. This is going to be great in the sort of green decks I enjoy drafting. I'm just really excited to cast an uncounterable to get turn 2 Teferi, to be honest.
Boo.
I think it is a legitimate, already pretty good thing to be doing of turn 1 Dork, turn 2 3 mana Planeswalker is so snowbally, and there are a lot of really good ones now. Like got Grist, Teferi, Dak Faden, Red Black Duretti, and this is just kind of perfect in that deck. A lot of your splash cards are actually gonna be Planeswalkers or legendary creatures. Yeah, I'm pretty high on this. I think I had my tier list of dorks pretty much exactly the same as you. I guess whether you want this or Jorga Tree Speaker says a lot about what sort of green deck you want to draft. Because they do go in very markedly different ones. But in terms of just enabling a really good play on turn 3 and a really good play on turn 4, this is going to be really good. And that uncounterable text does matter quite a bit. Yeah, I'm pretty high on this one. Now, I think it's worth saying the 2 toughness is also great just in terms of it's more relevant as a blocker, right? You'll be able to block some 1/1s at certain points of the game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it'll help you out against like a token deck or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Stop the bleeding a little bit. Cool. Right, do you want to take it away with our next green card, James?
Yeah, so next up in green, we have Elven Farsight. This is green for a sorcery. Scry 3, then reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, draw a card. I've heard this claimed as the Green Ponder. I'm really not buying it. It's you have to be very, very creature dense for this to be good, I think. You obviously, if you miss, it's a disaster on creatures, but you don't want to be in the spot where you have to keep a bad creature just so you draw a card. Like, if you cast this on turn 4 and you're like 2 non-creatures and an elf, well, I don't want the elf, but I have to keep the elf because otherwise I'm not drawing a card.
You could risk it. It is scry 3 and then reveal.
It is scry 3 and then reveal, but it's also awkward if you actually want one of the non-creatures, right?
Yes, very true.
And you don't want to put it on the bottom to try and reveal a creature, but you also, because you want to just draw it for your draw step next turn. But you also, if you leave it on top, you're just not drawing at all for this card, and you're just straight up down a card, which is pretty disastrous. I guess it could be playable in some sort of like elves deck, or where you're just incredibly creature dense, but really like
a 14 land elves thing or something.
Yeah, you're like, it would be so much stronger if it could hit a land or a creature, but just a creature, like, I think this is a lot worse than Oath of Nissa, for example, and that's not a card that goes in many cubes.
No, that's fair. No, I do think there is room for one of these effects in green. So in mine, I'm currently running Abundant Harvest, which kind of, it guarantees that you get one of the things that you want. So with that one, you choose land or non-land, and you go until you get one of those. I don't mind Abundant Harvest. I think there is room for some kind of card advantage in green, but yeah, maybe the fact you can just completely whiff off this, and you've just basically just effectively at that point you have wasted mana, and you will feel like you've wasted a draft pick as well. Probably not a good position to be in.
Yeah, I quite like Abundant Harvest as well, but yeah, Abundant Harvest does the thing you want. The fact this doesn't dig you towards lands means you're like one land hand with this is not a keepable hand, whereas with Abundant Harvest it is. Yeah, I think this is like too many hoops for just not really any payoff.
No, makes sense. All right, let's move on to our next green card, and actually our last green card. We have Entish Restoration. It is 2 and a green for an instant. Sacrifice a land, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, instead search your library for up to 3 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So this is probably the best one of these effects that we've seen. So we have Harrow, which sacking the land is part of the cost, which is very bad if it gets countered, but with that the lands don't enter the battlefield tapped, which is an upside. Then you also have Roiling Regrowth, which doesn't have that drawback, but enter tapped. But the fact that this can let you get 3 lands does seem very solid, especially if you're already in a deck that wants to be sacrificing lands. So I'm thinking specifically like the deck running like the 5 mana Titania, that when you sack a land, you make it 5/3. If you have Titania in play, you'll already have your 4 or more toughness creature. Use this to make yourself another 5/3 and ramp yourself as well. That could be very much me kind of living in Magical Christmas Land, and in fact, I don't run either Harrow or Roiling Regrowth in my cube where I am trying to do a land sacrifice thing. But the fact that this gets 3 is quite tempting. Like the fact that this effectively lets you ultimate Omnath, the 4-color Omnath, or do all the abilities on Omnath with 1 card is quite nice.
Yeah, I think I'm actually on Harrow being a bit better than this. I think that untapped text, I think I value having that really mana efficient turn early a bit higher than the upside of if you have a creature with power 4 or greater. Like, often the time you have a creature with power 4 or greater is after you care about the ramp. Like, yeah, it's nice for triple landfall triggers, but when Harrow works and you get that mana efficient turn, it costs 1 mana, right?
Yeah.
So I think I'd be slightly higher on Harrow, and we don't see Harrow getting run in many cubes. This is a strong effect. It's sack a land, get 2 basics. Like, your colors are fixed forever, and you get 2 landfall triggers, and you've ramped. So that's pretty nice, but I think ultimately, like, most of the time you'd rather just have a rampant growth just to be able to play it a turn earlier.
No, definitely. That's fair. And it is probably also just worth mentioning that we don't really put crop rotation in the same category as this, because while crop rotation does sack a land, it lets you go and get any land, which is a big difference compared to these ones, which are only just the basics.
Yes, for sure. Crop rotation effects, they tend to shine in spots where your land is doing something other than just tapping for mana. Whereas this is, more landfall triggers, fix your colors, ramp a little bit. Nice. Next up, we have Pippin, Guard of the Citadel. is a blue and a white for a legendary creature halfling soldier. It is a 2/2 with vigilance and ward 1, and it has tap. Target creature you control gains protection from the card type of your choice until end of turn. This is a powerful effect. It is very close to the Mother of Runes effect, actually, where it gains protection from a color of your choice until end of turn. It's going to blank a removal spell, or it's going to win a combat. You could argue the Mother of Runes effect is slightly better, because when they go to, if they try and like bolt your creature and you Mother of Runes it, well, then it also has protection from their, red creatures for the rest of the turn. But I think those effects are pretty close. But Mother of Runes costs 1 mana and protects itself. That's obviously the best of those effects. Then you've got Giver of Runes, which costs 1 mana and can't protect itself. I think those two are pretty clearly better than this. Getting that protection effect down early is just way more important than like a bit more power and the ward 1. Honestly, I think Skrelv is probably better than this as well, which gives a sort of pseudo protection. If you pay some life, you have to pay Phyrexian mana to use it. And then once at the point where you have 3 versions of this effect that are better, well, how many do you realistically want to put in a cube? Would be my question. Like, it's a fine card. I kind of struggle to see the spot where you want to include it over any of those cards.
No, I think that's fair. And I think the fact that this is a guild slot as well makes it more tricky, because effectively you have way more monocolored cards that you can run than you do guild slots. So what you pick is very important. And yeah, do you take, even if you think this card is comparable to the other ones in terms of power level, you have the question of, do I use up one of my few guild slots on an effect I can get somewhere else, or do I not? So yeah, so it coming in over the other 3, I think is going to be tricky. I do like this card, but I do agree with everything that you've said. The fact that this is the only one that can attack while also giving while giving something else to protection, because it has that vigilance, that is nice, and it does have more power and toughness. But then that kind of is leading you down a Azorius deck that is kind of aggressive, and those aren't normally the decks that you kind of see in white, blue, and cube a lot of the time. Like you did mention earlier, the white deck, like splashing blue for like a counter spell or something like that. But I don't think that is not an archetype. That is a deck that can be made from the cards there. It's not something that you're going to be kind of leaning your drafters towards, which is kind of generally what you want to be doing with your guild slots a lot of the time.
Yeah, 100%. And it's also, even if you're in that deck, you often don't have your blue mana on turn 2.
Yeah.
It is a good point though about attacking. I think like this is also a 2/2 unblockable if you want it to be that. You can just attack. Oh no, it's another creature. Yeah. So they can just block it if you attack. Yes.
Cool card, but yeah, just other ones out there might be doing more what we want. But let's move on to definitely a bigger card now. We have the Balrog of Moria. It is 4 black, and a red for an 8/8 legendary creature avatar demon. It has trample and haste, and when the Balrog of Moria dies, you may exile it. When you do, for each opponent, exile up to 1 target creature that player controls. It also has cycling for 3 and a red, which means you discard this card to draw a card. And when you cycle the Balrog of Moria, create 2 treasure tokens. So I hope this card is cheap. I do like reanimation effects or basically big, dumb creatures that put themselves into the graveyard. The reason for that is you have your reanimating cards, and basically this lets you skip the step of having a spell to discard them. Like you don't need a looting effect. You don't need a way of putting it into the graveyard. This does it itself. Having said all that, I think this is a very cool card to go in reanimated decks in more budget cubes. But in higher power level, I don't think it gets there. That's kind of the sweet spot for this, basically.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. Yeah, the problem is, right, that the cycling ability is just quite expensive. You want to be doing something a bit more impactful on turn 4 most of the time. But as you say, in a slightly low-powered budget cube, that might be completely fine. I think you absolutely do need to be probably in Reanimator. You need to care about having this in the graveyard, because if all you want to do is draw a card and make some treasures for 4 mana. You've got like Big Score, which is does that with a lot of upside. But yeah, I could see it as a nice like self-enabling reanimation thing in the low power cube. Sounds pretty cool. All right, next up we have Denethor, Ruling Steward. This is 1 a white and a black for a legendary creature human noble at uncommon. It's a 2/4, and it has, at the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn under your control, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token, and for 2 generic mana and sacrifice another creature, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So pretty obviously push towards aristocrats. It's nice that it enables itself. You can just sack your token, go to the end, drain them, go to the end step, get another token. The issue here is it is 2 mana every time. This is more than you normally want to pay for your sacrifice outlets. You really need to be triggering other things when you're activating this sack ability. If all you're doing is spending 2 mana and draining them for 1 and getting your token back, that's not really going to be a good enough way to use your mana in most games of Cube. But you're combining this with Blood Artist or Mayhem Devil or whatever, you could certainly get some work done. It's in a spot where it's not the best sacrifice outlet. You'd rather have the 3/1s, or if not that, then ones that cost 1 mana. 2 mana is a lot. And it's not the best way of getting more bodies. You'd rather have something like Bitter Blossom, even something like a Theomancer does a really good job at holding down the board and gives you something to sacrifice that you can immediately get back in the same way this does. But it is both of those things on 1 card, and certainly a way those decks can lose is you draw loads of your cards that make tokens and nothing to sacrifice, and some Blood Artists, but you can't actually sacrifice those cards. Or the converse of you draw a bunch of good sacrifice outlets and payoffs, but you don't have the fodder. And it's nice that you get kind of both on 1 card here, even if neither part is the best version of that effect. So I think that all adds up to a playable, if not the most exciting aristocrats card. Black-white is obviously, often you see like red-black as the default sacrifice colors, but Mardu is definitely also very real. So yeah, if that's an archetype in your cube, you can certainly consider this, I think.
Oh no, 100%. Like, this is the most aristocratic card to have ever aristocrated. Like, it does everything, not optimally, but it does do everything, and that, yeah, as you said, can be important. The fact that this is also an uncommon means that this will probably see a lot of play in Peasant Cube. Just as a solid role player, signpost card to what you can do in that archetype. Like, if someone sees this in a pack, you very quickly know that aristocrats is a thing that you're doing. So yeah, I think in kind of lower powered level cubes, this will see a fair amount of play and probably be a solid card as well.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, next up we have Eowyn Fearless Knight. It is 2 red and a white for a 3/4 legendary creature human knight. It has haste, and when Eowyn Fearless Knight enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls with greater power. Legendary creatures you control gain protection from each of that creature's colors until end of turn. So I really like this card. I'm quite high on it. It just comes in and takes out your opponent's best creature. Sometimes they will not have a large creature, but in that case scenario, you are then just attacking with a 3/4 haste. That is fine. Yeah, I really like this card. This is one of the cards that's making me consider running like a legendary matters thing in Boros. It will require some setup for your cube, and I will probably have to do a video on it at some point. But like, I'm thinking running cards like Isamaru, the legendary 1 mana 2/2, and like Kithian, Hero of Akros, and like Ragavan. Just running some cheap, good, aggressive legendary creatures in Boros, and having this as your top end. This is like your reason to be Boros, your reason to combine the 2 colors. Because yeah, all you really have to do is just curve out, play this, and then you probably just win. Like, Like if you curve out a bunch of legendary creatures, or even some legendary creatures with your other just aggressive creatures, and then you're able to blank half of their blockers, swing through. That seems like a very interesting and very good reason to be Boris. Like I'm actually going to be replacing Winota in my cube with this. I generally think it'll play better and will be more what those decks actually want to do.
Yeah, that sounds cool. This card's certainly a bit of a house. I actually played against this. We were jamming some games with our sealed decks after a pre-release, and my opponent cast this, and I went to put and exiles my lovely troll, and I went to put it under their card, and as you would with a Fiend Hunter, and then I was informed that I didn't get my card back, even if I killed the Eowyn, which was very
it's just
sad.
gone.
Yeah, it's just gone. Yeah, this is the games where you hit like their 4-drop with this. It's gonna be ridiculous. It's a three mana 3/4 haste that kills their thing and maybe enables attacks you wouldn't otherwise had. That's really strong. I wonder if you're underestimating slightly just the amount of games this is not going to have a target. I think especially I think this is at its best in cubes where they're quite creature-centric, and that's how most people are winning the games, is playing larger creatures. I think if there are more like combo game plans in the cube or more control decks which are running low creature counts, I feel like there's going to be quite a lot of games where this is just a 4-mana 3/4 haste, which is pretty underrated really at this point.
But I don't think that's the end. Like if this is getting through unblocked, then you'll probably already have a bit of a board state. I do completely acknowledge that. Yeah, there will be some games where that ability doesn't do anything. Then that just means you're swinging through with the rest of your board, hopefully.
Yeah, if you have a lot of pressure already, then certainly like 3/4 haste is not a bad card. But imagine the spots where they removed one of your 2-drop, they traded for your 3-drop. Would you rather have this to follow up with, or would you rather have like a Gideon, for example, or even something like a Hero of Blade Hold? This, they can take a couple of hits from it before they kill it. It doesn't snowball in the same way as some of those other 4-drops do.
No, that's fair. Yeah, this is definitely, I think, a bit more of a synergy card than something like the raw power level of like a Gideon, or I guess even like a Seasoned Dungeoneer, something like that. Yeah. This is definitely more. It goes in a deck and makes that deck a thing. I do think better, but yeah, I do completely acknowledge that. Yeah, kind of raw power level. This could end up being a 3/4 haste some of the time.
All right, next up we have 4th Eolingas! ! This is a red, a white, and X for a sorcery. You create X 2/2 red human knight creature tokens with trample and haste. And whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to one or more players this turn, you become the monarch. I think this is actually quite a hard card to evaluate in terms of that monarchy text. It's pretty interesting. So obviously this scales pretty well with the game. Right? This is a lot more exciting at 5 or 6 mana than at 3 mana. But the thing is, monarchy is such a swingy mechanic that there will be spots where you can, your opponent taps out for like a coalition relic on turn 3, right? And then you just jam this as a 3 mana 2/2 haste, get the monarchy, and that's going to be really good. If they don't have a creature on board, they can't get it back. The monarchy snowballs. It doesn't matter if they kill your 2/2 or they can block your 2/2 next turn. I think this does play pretty awkwardly versus a slightly more built out board, even if you can play it for like X's 4 or 5, because let's say you make like 3 2/2s. They have some blockers. So you're like, right, well, I only have this turn as a window to get the monarchy. So I'm going to make a bunch of attacks. They're going to eat a couple of creatures, but a couple of them are going to get through. So I get my monarchy. Well, the problem is then you don't have blockers back, right? So they're just going to take that monarchy back off you. So I think it has, against other creature decks, I think it maybe has some weaknesses. But I think the kind of split card of I can make a bunch of 2/2s later, like it's just scale really well. Like, when you get up into like 6-7 mana, this is just going to be a really big threat that kills them, and you don't, even if you don't care about monarchy that much, so the game's just going to end. And it has some outs of doing something early if you can get the monarchy and they don't have creatures early. And as with all monarchy cards, if you can pair it with that cheap removal, it makes those situations more frequent. If you can remove their blockers or their creatures that might swing back and get the monarchy back from you. I think this all adds up to an okay card, but I also kind of feel like I need to play with it.
No, I think that's fair. So I think I'm quite high on this card, if I'm honest with you. We've seen a lot of like the X mana make some 2/2s. This is the best by far of all of those, because these also because these can attack straight away. I was talking with the wife earlier, who if the listeners do not know, is very into Legacy. Apparently, people are testing this in Legacy now, and according to her, she's been speaking to people where actually playing X's 0 has still been very good.
Oh yeah,
just having a board having a bit of a board already. Playing X's or very early in the game, if you have a creature your opponent has nothing, just paying 2 for this, just playing the Boros X's 0, you get in very early, you become the monarch. That apparently has been good enough to like. I think that like someone top 8 something with it recently in Legacy. Like it must have been last weekend or something like that, because it's only just come out. But if the floor of this card is good at X's 0 and all the way up to like X is like 6 or 7, something like that, I think that will end up being quite powerful.
I must say I had not considered that X is 0 aspect of the card. Yeah, if you go 1-drop creature and you're on the play, and turn 2 you play this and take monarchy, and they don't have a creature, you kind of just win, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You have a monarchy on turn 2. That's absurd.
It's one of the quickest ways to get it, I would say.
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, you get kind of blown out if you play a 1-drop, they pass, you cast this for 0, and then they like fatal push your 1-drop. You're real sad about it. But you know, I think if you got to take some risks, don't you?
Exactly.
Yeah, that does sound strong. If you have a lot of 1-drops, and the issue in there is you're like things to be very aggressive because you have lots of 1-drops, but then often you'd rather be mono white or mono red rather than Boros in those spots. I
completely agree. But I think what's nice about both Aerlingus and Eowyn is that these are kind of reasons to be Boros.
That is true.
Like that's the main thing that Boros has been crying out for in Cube for quite a while. Like something to do that is better than the 2 individual colors, and maybe there is something there between Eowyn and fourth Aerlingus as kind of a like I do think fourth Aerlingus is probably better if you maybe already have tokens as well, or like this is where the anthem comes in as well. Then it's a bit more play there, so it's different. I think they are different decks. Like Eowyn and fourth Aerlingus they don't go in the same deck; they go in different decks. But I think between them, we might be able to make something work in Boros that's cool.
I kind of like it. Could see cards being a good buff for Plateau and Cube, which did need some help. I like it. Okay.
Awesome. All right, let's take it away with our third Boros card of the day. I think Boros has more than any other guild. We're going to be looking at Shadowfax, Lord of Horses. It is 3, a red and a white, for a 4/4 legendary creature horse. Horses you control have haste. When Shadowfax, Lord of Horses, attacks, you may put a creature card with lesser power from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. So, the most important thing to mention is that this card is an uncommon, which is wild. This is just very good. Like, I think this is probably decent in most power level queues, but the fact that you can play this in Peasant, I think, is going to be really, really stupid. The one, just being able to cheat on mana, this comes down on 5. It's a 4/4 haste. It's attacking straight away. If you're on the play, this is probably going to be bigger than what your opponent is doing, and it's bringing in a friend with it. that all seems very strong, and I think this is played quite strong at like pre-releases and that kind of stuff. The one drawback with this card that I can see in Cube is that a lot of the things that you would ideally wanting to be put into play have attack triggers. So things like Rabble Master cards, you won't get the attack trigger because they come in tapped and attacking. But being honest, you're not paying mana for it. Like I think that's magical Christmas land. Of me wanting everything from this card. But the fact is that you can still put like a Fury in with this. There's still plenty of big things you can put in, cheat on mana, and just kill your opponent. Like, I think Shadowfax is a very strong card.
Seems interesting. My main question is this haste word. I don't know what does the card tell me what that does. I don't know what that does.
Yes, James. Shadowfax shows us the meaning of haste.
Excellent. I can read it right on the card. I think I'm a little bit lower on this card than you. I guess I'm not really sure what the home is, because I feel like if we're in an aggressive Boros deck, then 5 is the top of our curve, right? So we're often just not going to have another creature in hand when we cast this. If we've curved out into it, would be my concern. And then I think a lot of the time I'd rather have most other 5-drops you would play. But I guess in Peasant Cube, I could see it there.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. Part of my hype for this card is based around that I'm comparing it against uncommons a lot of the time. And this just does a lot more.
Yeah, I can see that. Especially as well, it's nice if you have, if instead of having attack triggers, you have creatures with ETB triggers. Well, those you do get, and maybe they can actually get creatures out of the way and enable a good attack for you. It is worth noting, though, as well, the creature does come in tapped and attacking. You can't use this to cheat on mana if that creature doesn't have a good attack.
Yeah.
If you're attacking this into their 3/3, you can't put in your 2/2. Well, I mean, you could, but in most situations you won't want to.
But then, this will cause some very weird and interesting versions with blocks, because, like, if you're putting in a creature that they can trade with, it's like, cool, they can, or they can eat a smaller creature, but then they could just be taking 4 every turn.
Yeah, that's true. And if you're attacking with this and a bunch of other stuff, then maybe you're probably fine with them eating 1 creature if you're just getting in so much damage.
Yeah. If you've got your value already from it, from like an ETV, then you might just be okay with that, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, cheating on mana is really good, so I could certainly see it having some good spots. All right, next up in our gold cards, we have, I think, the first 3-color card of the day. This is Aragorn, King of Gondor. This is 1 blue, red, white, so 1 a Jeskai for a 4/4. It's a legendary creature, human noble, with vigilance and lifelink. When Aragorn, King of Gondor, enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. Love pushing those monarch cards, and when Aragorn attacks, up to 1 target creature can't block this turn. If you're the monarch, creatures can't block this turn. This is a real scary card. Obviously hard to cast. It's and that it does kind of limit the decks it goes in, right? Because to really maximize this, to maximize the third ability, it's like you want a lot of creatures, but then how many like aggressive creature-based decks are there that are in full Jeskai that can cast this on turn 4? Probably not that many, but also maybe it's fine if you're not maximizing that last ability, I could see this being really good in just a Jeskai control deck, where maybe you have a lot of creature removal, so you're pretty good at keeping the monarchy. And 4 mana 4/4 Vigilance Lifelink is also just going to keep you alive pretty well. That life gain's really nice on this. I think this is pretty damn strong, actually. I think, obviously hard to cast, but I think if you can cast it, and reasonably put this card in your deck, you're not going to be disappointed with it.
No, exactly. Yeah. My notes are pretty much what you said. I'm not sure what deck this goes into, but I'm not sure it needs one. There will be shells that can make this work. Like, there's plenty of like pyromancer effects in Jeskai. Like, this would be perfectly fine as like the 4-mana top end. So like your deck is all like Monastery Mentors, that kind of stuff. Like you're making tokens that way. Because if you have any kind of board state, and if you can stay the Monarch for a turn, I'm kind of assuming you just win, because your whole board's unblockable then.
Yeah, I could certainly see that being true if you have a board. But it's just the question then of, in your Jeskai decks, how often do you actually have a big board?
No, exactly.
And often the creatures you're playing are like evasive anyway, right? You're playing your like
Yeah, they
Vendilion
might fly,
and
yeah.
whatnot. But yeah, I think just 4-mana 4/4 Vigilance Lifelink, you become the Monarch, is a really strong card. I think, yeah, even if you didn't care about that at all, about the last bit at all, it would be pretty good. And, it enables attacks for itself pretty well. It's very hard to block this. You have to have 2 good blocks for 4/4.
Yeah.
And Vigilance on a monarchy creature is really nice, because it lets you get in, gain your life, and still have a blocker back to keep the monarchy.
Yeah, I think it's scary, and also like one of the creature types that's quite easy to go in multiple colors is humans. Like, I've definitely played around before with humans across multiple colors, and when I did it, I don't think it ever properly got there. But I think that may be because I was trying to go into green a bit too much. But maybe there are more good blue humans than you think there are. Like, a lot of them just happen to be humans and stuff. So maybe that is where this could go.
Yeah, I could see it. Some sort of like multicolor humans aggro deck could be this could be sick if you can make it work. Play like Champion of Parish, 2-drop, Mantis Rider, this guy game.
Ooh, Mantis Rider, yeah.
Love a Mantis Rider.
Yeah. No, definitely. And then if that's something you're committing to, you can play. What's the land that taps for any color as long as it is casting a creature?
So there's a few of them. There's Cavern of Souls is obviously great.
Yeah.
But there's Unclaimed Territory, I think it's called.
That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
There's quite a few of them. Yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely. But yeah, those on top of like fetches and triumphs does make this easier to cast, which could be quite cool.
Yeah, I could see it. Anyway, if that one looks a bit too easy to cast, do you want to talk us through Aragon the Unifier?
Yeah. Let's add another color in there. So Aragon the Uniter is a red, a green, a white, and a blue for a 5/5 legendary creature human noble. Whenever you cast a white spell, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Whenever you cast a blue spell, scry 2. Whenever you cast a red spell, Aragon the Uniter deals 3 damage to target opponent. And whenever you cast a green spell, target creature gets +4/+4 until the end of turn. So this obviously does a lot of things. You want to be in a very heavy multicolored format and deck to just firstly be able to cast this. Then what's tricky is you then want to have more multicolored spells to follow this up with. We do run Omnath in a lot of cubes. This is the same colors, but why Omnath gets in there as well is it's rewarding us for playing lands. We're going to be having lands in a 4-color deck to help us fix us, like things like fetch lands. We're going to be running lots of lands in those decks, because we need to be able to actually cast Omnath, and then we're rewarded when we do it. You kind of it's a kind of own self-built kind of engine in the deck. Aragon the Uniter is a very cool card, and this might be one of I might build in Commander, but all those abilities are very cool, but it requires you to have more spells afterwards to really get the value out of it. Because if you can't follow it, because ideally you're casting ideally you cast Aragon the Uniter on turn 4, then on turn 5 you cast Omnath, so you get all of the abilities triggering all at once. Because if you cast a multicolored spell, you get each trigger for each of the color of the spell that you've cast. I think in regular cube this will definitely struggle, but like there are like the chromatic cube is a thing on Arena. Like maybe this could see games there where just you have more fixing, you have more colors, and there's an environment built around doing multicolored things. Because as a multicolor payoff, this is quite strong in that, but inherently that is hard to do in most cubes where you are drafting your lands.
Yeah, I could see. Yeah, I think you can get away with a lot in the chromatic cube, is my understanding. I've not played a lot of it. You need to get away with quite a lot to play this. I think the difference between 3 and 4 colors is pretty huge, actually, especially on the 4 drop. Like the previous Aragorn is in the realm of like, well, you can splash this in your 2-color deck, but this is you have to be like you're probably giving up a lot to make your mana here. And that often means you're going to be behind on board when you cast this. And I don't really like that the only one of these abilities really does anything to stabilize you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the red one doesn't even target a creature.
Yeah, the bottom 2 are just aggressive abilities. It's going to be really hard to be attacking with anything once you've got this in play, because a lot of the time, you've diddled around playing tap lands. Your opponent's had a good curve of creatures, and you can't afford to attack with your 5/5. They're just going to kill you on the crackback. Yeah, it's a cool card. It does a lot of powerful things, but I don't really see the home for this. Like why Omnath is so great, right? Is you play it, you play your land right away, you get your mana back right away, you've gained a bunch of life, that stabilizes you. Because you can follow it up with another spell. And it gives you your card back right away. But this doesn't really do any of those things. This would be great if you could, if you could like curve out with some creatures, cast this. If they don't kill it, it's going to go nuts next turn, and your board's going to kill them. But I just don't really see the spot where that's realistically a way you're building your deck with this casting cost in mind.
No, exactly. Yeah, just that casting cost is it's very tricky when you're not being rewarded really for it. Like your reward for drafting the 4 colors is that you can play this card, whereas with Omnath, you have fetch lands that kind of they trigger landfall abilities, and everything kind of comes together a bit better. Like all these abilities on Aragorn are fine, but not as game ending or backbreakingly annoying as Omnath, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, next up we have Andúril, Flame of the West. This is 3 colorless mana for a legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +3/+1, and whenever equipped creature attacks, create 2 tapped 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying. If that creature is legendary, instead create 2 of those tokens that are tapped and attacking. And crucially, the equip cost is 2. So notably, the same casting cost and equip cost as the swords. I think if we were to rank these with the swords, if it was Sword of Andúril, Flame of the West, it's probably somewhere in the middle of the pack. I think it's definitely worse than like Sword of Fire and Ice and Sword of Feast and Famine, for example. Like not getting those protections is huge. It doesn't actually let your creature win combat that well. +3/+1 isn't going to keep it alive a lot of the time. And you've paid so much mana to get this equipped in play and equipped to something. I think this is just going to be too slow. Like the swords are mostly too slow at this point, and I think this is worse than the best swords. So I don't see this one seeing much play.
I think I would actually put this. I'm gonna top 2 we've said. I probably the one that like Mills and Dogs.
What's that Body and Mind is better than this for sure.
That's probably 3rd, but I would put this just below that. And part of my reasoning is that with all those other swords, if you don't have creatures, they do nothing. This is the same. Like you still need a creature to start this, but the fact that it makes flying spirits means that if the creature is removed, you can then just re-equip it to the tokens you've already made, and then you have 4/2 flyers repeatedly from then onwards, in general, I think we are both of the consensus that none of the swords should really be played in cube in 2023. In lower power level cubes, I think this one could be fine, especially if you're doing tokens or if you're doing equipment matters. But yeah, just in general, yeah, don't run these.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. It's also, it'd be a decent chunk higher on it if the tokens at least had the good grace to be untapped, so that you could block and not be dead after you've spent all of this mana. Yeah, like it's good against like people untapping and killing the equipped creature in that way, because it's giving you something to re-equip to, but it doesn't help if they're smacking you back with a lot of creatures. So yeah, it doesn't seem great to me.
No, all good. All right, let's move on to our next one. Next up, we have Horn of Gondor. It is 3 generic for a legendary artifact. When Horn of Gondor enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. It has the activate ability, pay 3 generic and tap it. Create X 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of humans that you control. So this is technically not a do nothing in enchantment or artifact, because it does make you a 1/1 for 3 mana. I think this is very strong, but this is very slow. This is almost like a 6-drop that you need a decent board to really take full advantage of.
It's a 6 mana 1/1.
It's a 6. No, it's a 6 mana 2/2. It's a 6 mana for
2/1. Sorry, 6 mana raise the alarm. Yeah.
Yes, that's it. But there are, if you have a very heavy human section, I could see a point where you would try this. This is definitely a commander card. There's no other way around. This is definitely one made for commander where you're a humans deck. This will just make you a massive board state, and it will be quite strong. In cube, it's very hard to justify spending 3 mana for this and then spending another 3 mana when you could just play 2 creatures that would be better than this. Like obviously, Magical Christmas Land, this could make you a massive board state, but at that point, you probably were already in a position where you were winning if you have that many humans for this to make you that massive board state.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. You need to be getting a lot of tokens for turn this enters, really. And even then, it's a lot of mana. Like 6 mana to play and activate this is I think just too much. Like theoretically, it does enable itself, right? If you had a lot of time, you can, even if you had no humans to start off with, you play this, you activate it, you have 2, then you have 4, then you have 8. But that's just not how games of cube really play out at this point. The games, you've got to be spending your mana more efficiently than this card, I think, ultimately. Just too much mana, I think, at this point.
Yep, no, definitely. All right, you want to take it away with the big card, the one that I hope a listener opens a very fancy version of.
Next up we have, I'm going to kill myself with this card, man. I'm going to really enjoy it. Next up we have the One Ring. It is 4 generic mana for a legendary artifact with indestructible, of course. When the One Ring enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. So it can be real hard to die next turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring, and you can tap it to put a burden counter on the One Ring, then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. I think this is a really cool card. I think they've sort of captured the flavor of the thing quite well. So I think, in cube terms, I think the sort of obvious comparison to this is Coercive Portal, but it draws so many more cards than Coercive Portal, but it will kill you at some point. So by the time Coercive Portal has drawn you 1 card, this has drawn you 3 cards. You play it, you tap it, you draw a card, put a burden counter on it, you untap, you take 1, you draw 2 cards. The next turn it draws you 3 cards. So after 2 turns, you've drawn 6 cards with this. And the flow of cards is not slowing down, but neither is the loss of life, because at that point you're just bolting yourself every upkeep. Having said that, there are things you can do about it, and you are drawing so many cards, you will be able to, if you have them in your deck, you will find them most likely. I think you obviously you need to be either killing your opponent, or you need to be finding a way to deal with the One Ring and stop it killing you after you've drawn your millions of cards from it. But there's some pretty good ways to do that. I think probably the best is just flickering it. You flicker it out, it now has no burden counters on it. It's up to you whether you want to put one on it at some point to draw one card, or if you just want to stop taking the damage. Also bounce it back to your hand. And at some point, you can even, obviously, you'd rather not be using your disenchants, or disenchant doesn't work, but your exile effects on your own cards. But, if you've drawn 6, even, after the next turn, you'll have drawn 10 cards from this, then you're fine. You can afford a bit of card disadvantage at that point. You could exile it or bounce it back to your hand, whatever you need to do. I think it's really cool. I'm quite excited to play with it. If you can get this down reasonably early, because obviously it is just card draw. It's not advancing your board in any other way. But the sort of turn of reprieve from being attacked that it gives you, followed by a lot of cards very quickly. I think this can be pretty strong. It's quite a nice thing to accelerate out of. You've got your colorless lands, you've got your signets, your talismans. In more powerful cubes, it's like a great thing to mana vault out, for example. Obviously, it doesn't stack well with those ones dealing you damage in the long term, but I think just the sheer quantity of cards is going to make this pretty good. But I could 100% be wrong and just kill myself with it all the time. But I'd believe that as well.
Now, what you said there about kind of the resetting part, that kind of definitely nudged something in my brain. There are so many sacrifice artifact effects currently in my cube.
Are you going to say Goblin Welder again?
I wasn't specifically, but again,
you would not be wrong. I think this is really good with Welder.
Getting better, yeah. No, but so in mine, we are trying out the kind of black-red, sacrifice artifact thing. So we have stuff like Only Cult Anvil, Duretti Ingenious Iconoclast, currently things like Brea's Apprentice. These are all things that sacrifice artifacts, so you can keep control of the One Ring if you need it to. And then, Goblin Welder lets you just bring it back and forth, reset it, keep drawing loads of cards, keep you alive that little bit longer. Is it too slow, do you think? Or is it the fact, because in theory, best case, ideally you're playing this on turn 3 with like a Signet or a Mana Rock. So then what's that? Is that you're drawing one card on turn 3, 2 cards extra on turn 4. That probably is good enough, actually.
Yeah, it's listen, I think against aggro, you're mostly not going to be that happy with this card. The protection ring is nice, but it's just going to be your life total's already under pressure. It's going to be a problem pretty quickly. So you are going to have ways to deal with it. Think like Yorion, Venser, Flickerwisp, this sort of stuff. Ideally you don't want to be sort of spending a whole card by Oblivion ringing this, for example. But you want to have something to do with this. Ideally, you'd want this out before turn 4, if you possibly can. But listen, I think it's definitely one to try. I think if you have Coercive Portal in the cube, this is most likely better. And I think in most cubes there'll be enough ways to deal with this and try and not die to it, but it'll be worth running and seeing how it plays.
No, definitely. Yeah, good to know that the One Ring is good. We like it. Yeah, the flavor of this one definitely also works a bit better than the Ring tempts you mechanic, but yeah, cool card. All right, let's move on to our next artifact. We have Phial of Galadriel. It is 3 generic mana for a legendary artifact. If you would draw a card while you have no cards in hand, draw 2 cards instead. If you would gain life while you have 5 or less life, you gain twice that much life instead. And tap to add 1 mana of any color. So I will be completely honest, I was not originally fussed by this card, but when we played against it in the Streamer Showdown, it actually did quite a lot of work. Like I'm not sure what power level of cubes this goes into, but the decks that it goes into, I like quite a lot. Like, it is a solid payoff for like decks that, or for strategies that don't want to have cards in hand. Things like Hellbent cards or Madness card or like Madness decks, where kind of you run out of cards quickly because you're discarding them to make your creatures bigger. So like basically, this and like a Wild Mongrel is how I want to play Magic. Like, this is just giving you the stuff to fuel. Because also, like, it's not the first card you draw every turn. It's whenever you have no cards in hand. So if you have ways of drawing cards throughout a turn while you have none in hand, you can just be continually pitching them, this kind of stuff. I really like that, but I'm also aware that most of the time this is just going to be a 3-mana rock that taps for 1, and I'm aware that's not really where we are in Cube. Probably haven't been there for a while, but I do think this effect is cool.
Yeah, the effect is powerful. I think there's a certain amount of tension in it with the decks that want to get empty-handed quickly want to be playing more impactful things on turn 3 than essentially a glorified Manolith.
Yes, you'd definitely rather play like Angie's Ravager or something like that. I completely agree with that.
Exactly, and the decks that would be in for a 3-mana rock, they might play the one where you put charge counter on it and you get 2 mana out of it. Those decks tend to keep hard in hand. They tend to have card draw spells, so I think it's going to be tricky to find the exactly the right home for this. But I agree, it's a cool effect, and it's certainly, like, when it works, it looks very impressive. And yeah, it does have a nice spot in, if you go to your draw step empty-handed, you draw 2 cards, you like play a land, play a cantrip. Now your cantrip draws you 2 cards. And that's pretty nice. But yeah, I think it's just going to be tough to find the spot for the deck that both wants this effect and gets Hellbent reliably enough to use it.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, it's Hellbent is more kind of like, Hellbent is a Rakdos mechanic. It wants you to be going fast. This is kind of like, this is a mana rock. Like, it's a 3-mana mana rock. That's not really what those decks are known for.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next up we have Wizard's Rockets. This is a single generic mana for an artifact. It enters the battlefield tapped, and you can pay X mana and sacrifice it to add X mana in any combination of colors. So it fixes your mana. It doesn't generate mana, but it fixes mana. And when Wizard's Rockets is put into a graveyard from a battlefield, you draw a card. This is an egg. If you want eggs, this is not a bad one.
Is it an egg or a nut? I'm never sure the difference there.
What's a nut in Magic terms? This is news to me.
There is a difference. Hold on. MTG nut.
Well, Daniel Google's nuts.
Sorry.
So I think this is significantly worse than like Chromatic Star and Chromatic Sphere, because entering tapped is a pretty big drawback. You can't crack it right away. But it is nice that if you don't have to activate this ability in order to get the card. You can sacrifice it to another effect and get a card. So it can maybe do some shenanigans with Croc Clan Ironworks or something like that. Goblin Welder is a nice thing to welder out. You get your card back. And the fact that it color fixes as much mana as you want, rather than like Chromatic Star or even something like Terrarian, which I think this card's a bit close to actually. But you need wash for like 1 or 2 mana. So maybe if you had some infinite mana combos in your deck, you'd play like Zerda or something. This can then get you into as much colored mana as you want. The reality is all of these things are kind of niche. There's not that many cubes that really support eggs as an archetype, and if you just want 1 or 2 eggs or nuts, whatever they are, then Chromatic Star and Chromatic Sphere are better.
I'm still looking, by the way. There is a difference, but
this is not a bad card by any means. I just don't know how often we're going to want it.
No, I agree. So obviously, this coming into play tapped is definitely a downside. But like in larger cubes, I could see running this. Like I just generally have been more and more impressed with like Mishra's Bauble, Urza's Bauble, Chromatic Sphere, and Chromatic Star, just kind of cheap artifacts that kind of just make things that little bit smoother, basically. This is definitely not as good as Chromatic Star or Chromatic Sphere, but if you were above 540, like if you were a 720 cube, I could see running the third one of these. Like that, I generally like them. Like they just most decks can run them as a way of kind of just smoothing or filtering if you're different colors, that kind of stuff. Like, it's not as reliable as like a fetch land, but it will do the job if you need it to. But like, yeah, if you're in any kind of artifact based deck, like if you've got constructs and stuff, just having more artifacts, they all like that. And yeah. If you're larger than a 540, then I'd probably consider give Wizard's Rocket a go. But if not, then you're probably good with just the Chromatic Sphere and Chromatic Star that we already have.
Yeah, I think the big downside for me as to this versus the Sphere and Star is that when you're like out of gas later in the game and you need to draw something now, drawing this is really bad because you're not getting your card until the next turn, you know?
No, definitely. No, I would agree. Like the other ones are more consistent, which is probably better. This one technically has a higher upside because it can do that filtering, but just the base level of it being a egg or nut. I will continue looking for this. The other ones are better, just more consistent, basically. Which is kind of you're running these to make your deck smoother, therefore you want them to be consistent, I think is the best way to describe it.
Sure. Yeah, I'd get be on board with that.
All right, well, let's take it away with our first land of the day. We're going to be talking about Barad-dûr. It is a legendary land. Barad-dûr enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary creature. It taps to add a black, and it has the ability pay XX and a black, and tap it to amass Orcs X. Activate only if a creature died this turn. So basically what this means is when a creature dies, you can pump all your mana into it, and you get a creature that's pretty much half as large as the amount of mana that you put into it. That's what the XX is for. This seems pretty solid. Like, it does seem a little slow, but in a grindy aristocrat deck, I'm thinking more kind of like the red-black aristocrats tend to be a bit more faster, but a bit more aggro. The white-black ones that are running things like Lurrus, that they can be a bit slower. This could have play there. Like, it is just a mana sink effectively in those aristocrat decks. Like you can make like all you need to do is to get rid of a 1/1, and you could pump 7-8 mana into this. Get a 3/3, get a 4/4. That's quite good. That is a pretty solid beta. Or if you just want to just continually replacing the tokens that you make because you have Blood Artist effects, just put 3 mana into this and make a 1/1 every turn. You will eventually drain them out if you don't have another way of killing them.
Yeah, I could see this doing some work for sure. It's not what you're going to be spending your mana on very early, but you hopefully find a spot in the early game where you can play your tap land without it costing you too much. Or these decks do have some amount of legendary creatures, like Jadar, for example, often seems to play in those decks, Yawgmoth, so sometimes it will enter untapped. And then later in the game, as you say, you flood out, and there are going to be spots where it's like, even if you're not sacrificing the creature, sometimes your creature just trades in combat or whatever, and you're like, yeah, cool, pay 5 mana, make a 2/2, and that's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Next up, we have Minas Tirith. This is also a legendary land and has the same text. Minas Tirith enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary creature. This one taps for a white, and you can pay 1 white and tap it to draw a card. Activate only if you attacked with 2 or more creatures this turn. So comparing this to Barad-dûr, I think the ability is kind of stronger, right? You'll use this earlier in the game if you've had a good curve out. So obviously this is pushing you towards an aggressive white deck, requirement to attack with 2 or more creatures. But I think kind of a flip side of that is the decks that this wants to go in are often pretty averse to having tap lands in them. Like, you want to be playing a 1-drop on turn 1 a lot of the time. And so this is often going to cost you pretty meaningfully having this a tap land in your opening hand. They do actually have a lot of legendary creatures in there often. You've got like Kythian, Thalia, Adley. There's a lot of legendary creatures in these decks. So yeah, if you can sneak it in without it costing you too much to tap land, this is going to be very real. Like from not that late in the game, you're effectively playing 3 mana to draw a card, but those decks definitely can run out of gas. So I could see this being pretty effective.
Yeah, I quite like this. Like the point where this actually properly gets you is this is the, I guess, the only land in your hand. Actually, no, I'm kind of thinking like, yeah, just because the amount of legendaries that it has, like, and as I'm also thinking of buffing up the number of legendaries in mine in white.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they do also sometimes kill your legendaries. As like I think there will be spots where it costs you for sure, but I could certainly see the reward being worth it.
100%, and yeah, like the actual payoff of this card is you're doing the thing that the deck is going to be doing anyway. You are going to be hopefully attacking with 2 or more creatures, and yeah, just giving yourself that little bit of extra reach, I think, is going to be pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, don't put this in like your blue-white control deck.
No,
there's no point.
All right, lovely. Let's move on to our final card of the day. We're going to be talking about Mount Doom. It is a legendary land. You can tap it and pay a life to add a black or a red. You can pay 1, a black and a red, and tap it to have Mount Doom deal 1 damage to each opponent. Or you can pay 5, a black and a red, and tap it to sacrifice Mount Doom and a legendary artifact. Choose up to 2 creatures, then destroy the rest. Activate only as a sorcery. So, can we agree to just ignore the bottom line? Like, I don't think that's... Like, actually, there probably are some legendary artifact creatures in here, in Cube and stuff. Like, Cauldron Complete, but maybe. But generally speaking, you're running this as a repeatable way of pinging your opponent out. If you're a Rakdos aggressive deck, this is kind of free to run because you don't care about your life total. You're just looking for ways of dealing your opponent some extra damage. Kind of this is kind of the flip side. This is like this is kind of like the flip of Minas Tirith. Basically, it's kind of like it's doing what the deck that it goes in wants to do. Like Minas Tirith wants you to be attacking. This just wants you to get your opponent's life total lower. Like this is basically here to deal them the final couple of points once your opponent has stabilized. Once you're in the aggro deck, once your opponent has played like the 5/5 or the 6/6 and you're out of removal, this gives you a way of finishing the game. You just have to kind of hold on, deal them the last bits of damage, and try and get there. I think it's fine. I think I'm not sure what power level of cube it goes into, if I'm honest with you. Like, red black doesn't really have too many utility lands that it kind of like interesting kind of lands that also tap for both colors. Kind of like, I don't think there's the horizon land in black red yet. Until that's printed, this could be a more interesting option.
I could see it. I'm not ignoring the last line because
I'm going
to sacrifice my 1 ring before it kills me. Destroy the whole board. I will win both on flavor grounds.
I do love that, James.
Because I'm not dying to my 1 ring or my opponent's creatures because they're all dead. Yes, outside of that, the last line isn't very good. So the issue I have with... I think it's fine if you're very, very aggressive as a pain land that you can activate later to deal 1, but it is a lot of mana to deal 1. It's 4 mana essentially, because you're tapping this land as well. And I think it's worth noting that this sort of pain land where it always deals a damage to you is a lot more costly than, for example, the cycle of plain lands of like Landwar Wastes and that cycle, for example, where they tap for a colorless or you can pay a life to make 1 of the color. This is, you will get to points in games where you just can't tap this mana anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty real cost. Like, this is definitely on average doing more damage to you than your opponent in like 90% of games, I think, right?
Yeah, but it's Mount Doom, that kind of.
Exactly, and I'm going to
Yeah.
sacrifice my one
Yeah.
ring. Yeah. Yeah, I'm a little bit skeptical of it as just like an aggro finisher. Like, I think it's worse at that, for example, than like a Ramnap Ruins, which obviously is a one color land, but but yeah, it's a lot of mana to deal one damage to them, you know.
No, exactly, and I think that's where I'm kind of like struggling to work out what power level it goes into, because obviously this is a mythic. I can't imagine it'll be like, if this is expensive, it's entirely for flavor reasons primarily. It's like it's like a fiver that's just come out. Yeah, if this was super cheap, I could I would recommend this for Ephemeral budget cubes, but it's a mythic and it's kind of like an iconic-y theme of a card, so it's probably going to end up being a bit pricey for those, unfortunately.
Yeah. Cool card though.
Yeah, awesome. Right, well, that brings us to the end of the set review. But before we get everyone out of here, me and James, as a tradition, are going to give what we think are the top 5 cube cards from this set that we think are going to make the most impact, and which ones we like the most. There will be a bit of our own individual biases. There definitely is that with mine. James, what's your number 5? What's your 5th favorite card from the set?
Okay, and number 5, I have gone for Flowering of the White Tree. It's the white for an anthem that does more for your legends. I think this card's going to be pretty strong. Like shaving a mana off Glorious Anthem is a pretty big game. See this being strong in honestly most white weenie decks. It's always shocking to be how many legends you just end up with in these decks. Yeah, I could see this seeing a lot of play in a pretty sizable number of cubes, to be honest.
No, fair. Yeah. I think the Flowering of the White Tree is an awesome card. My number 5, I think mine might end up being a bit higher on yours, actually, but my number 5, I've gone for Delighted Halfling. So I think it is a perfect, it's a very solid mana dork. It lets you cast a lot of very powerful cards. I guess the reason why it's not as high on mine as I think it's going to be on yours is because the 2 main cards that you want to be casting with it, or that are probably most impactful, I truly hate. Like, I hate 3 mana Teferi and I hate Oko. So that does seem, in theory, what you want to be following up Delighted Halfling with in like an ideal world. Like following up with one of those, and I can't deny that it's not going to be very strong because it will be. But Delighted Halfling, solid mana dork, even if I don't like some of the things that it's going to lead to.
That's very fair. I can understand that turn 2 Teferi is probably only fun from one side.
Oh, that's so problematic.
It's fine. You might have a counter spell. Oh no, it's uncounterable. Cool. Yeah. So number 4 is one which I'm sure there's a very real chance I'm massively overestimating it, but I've gone for the One Ring. I think I'm really excited to play with this card. It's gonna draw me so many cards. It's gonna be great. I probably can't be trusted to play with this card. I will not have discipline and assume I'm going to find a way to deal with it and then just die. But I think the upside is really high, and it's definitely gonna be it's gonna lead to some really good games. You know. My initial writing of the list, I had it at number 2, so I've exercised some discipline here.
Nice. No, it does seem sweet. And yeah, I'm glad that a card as iconic as that has some play. My number 4, I've gone for Fourth Aerlingus. I just like this card. It gives me something that I want to do in Boros. And just as we've just seen over the years, Monarch is just very powerful. And if this is good as a 2-drop, as it is as a 6 or 7 drop, then I think this could be a very powerful card. So looking forward to playing with it. Need to pick one up.
Yeah, for sure. I could certainly imagine this is what's meant to be on my list instead of One Ring. Cool. Number 3, I've gone for Orcish Bowmasters. I think this is just going to do enough in most matchups. It's going to snipe a 1 toughness creature, or they're going to be drawing extra cards, or it's just going to be, here's 2 bodies that get a little bit of value. Maybe I'm sacrificing them, maybe I'm in the wheels deck. I think it just has a lot of it's going to do a surprising amount in a lot of games. Or I guess not surprising if you're following the legacy hype, but yeah, I think this card is going to be pretty strong.
Yep, I agree entirely with you, James. My number 3 is also Orcish Bowmasters. Yeah, I think 3 is a good level for this. I think it's going to be good in cube, but not as like the sun will still rise, everything will be okay, the format is fine. Like, yeah, like it's not going to break anything, but it'll just be a very good, very solid card. And
yeah, for sure. At number 2, I've gone for Delighted Halfling. Yeah, I think it's going to enable some really sweet turn 2, turn 3 plays. I think Uncounterable is a big deal. And it's also worth noting, like we talk about this a lot, like it can only cast legendary creatures. It still taps for a colorless. This is, you've already got your green mana if you've cast this. I think, yeah, this is a really strong dork. I think it's probably just below the hierarchs, but I'm definitely way more excited about putting this in my deck than Elvish Mystic. I think it's going to go into a lot of cubes and be really good.
No, 100%. Yeah, it's a very solid card. All right, my number 2 is Eowyn Fearless Knight. Similar to Fourth Erlingus, it's a Boros card. I'm actually kind of excited for playing. Like, this has actually kind of given me something to build towards in Boros now. Like, will be having a chat with you in the next couple of days, going to give you a rough idea of what I'm thinking of, see what people in the Q pod think of it. But yeah, I'm thinking of going, trying out legendaries in Boros, and it's kind of this card has given me the impetus and kind of, I think it'll tie the room together nicely, basically, is what I think I'm saying.
Okay,
I think it should be good. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Number 1, I don't think is going to be a massive shock for me. I've gone for Reprieve. I think this card is just so flexible. It does something that white aggressive decks really, really want to do and don't have good tools to do at the moment. You compare this card to putting Mana Tithe in your deck. Mana Tithe's a lot funnier, but this is a lot better. And yeah, and not to say it's only good in White Weenie. It's still going to be great in your blue-white control deck. It's Raman's great in your blue-white control deck. But on top of that, it also it goes in places you can't play Raman. So I think this is definitely for me going to be the most impactful card of the set. Cube.
Yeah, 100%. Reprieve is my number 1 too. I completely agree. It just does so much for an uncommon. Like, this will also be the most played cube card from this set. I think that's very easy to say. The sign of like a staple of a good card is that it can be played. It is played in everything that can play it. This will be fantastic in Peasant. It'll be fantastic in Unpowered. It'll be fantastic on the Mitgo Vintage Cube, all the way up to the highest of power levels. This is just going to be a good card in all of them. And like, people just will not be expecting this as well. It's in white. That does, like, Remand is already a good card, but you've put it in white where people won't be expecting this. Where they've recently printed all the initiative creatures and stuff, and as they start coming into more and more cubes, we've kind of been playing them for quite a while, but like, only one initiative creature is on the Mitgo Vintage Cube. As they start putting more and more of these things in, white is just going to get better and better, and Reprieve is going to be it's going to be a cornerstone of that for the future, I think.
Yeah, 100% agree.
All right, thank you all very much for watching and listening. Do make sure you subscribe, follow, give it a 5-star review, whatever the positive affirmation that your podcast platform of choice allows you to do. It would all be greatly appreciated and really help me and James out. Just leaves me to thank James for being here. Thank you again, dude. Had a lot of fun, and yeah, a lot of cool cards from the set.
Yeah, no, thanks, Dan. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I hope you enjoyed. If you got this far to the very bitter end, I presumably you found something good about it. And we'll see you soon for some more Cube content.
Yep, fantastic. You all take care, and we will see you all soon. Goodbye.